Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by Trainer Road. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee, and to my right, and you can join us on YouTube so you can see that. Otherwise, I understand if you're listening, that's meaningless. But to my right, Amber Pierce from Cannondale and Trainer Road.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Good morning.
We have Chad Timmerman, our head coach.
Hi, buddy.
And then around the circle, we have Nate Pearson, our CEO.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good.
Welcome back. We missed you last week.
We did miss you.
You guys did a great job.
Hey, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
The three gigglers.
Yeah, lots of laughing.
You, Pete, and Jonathan.
laughing.
Like
Lots
you
of
guys,
laughing.
yeah,
Lots of
see?
laughing.
Just like that.
Yeah.
You guys
I know.
all, and I listened at 2 times speed, and the giggles got really high pitched.
Pretty funny.
It's like little
That's good.
Smurfs.
Nice.
That's a
I like
great
that.
idea.
Yeah, awesome. So we talked a lot about you. Well, first of all, you were on like a family vacation. You did train a bit.
Disney World, not Disneyland.
Disney World.
Yep.
Horrible. You trained. Yes, I know. Forgive us, please. You trained a bit through it.
Yep.
What'd you do?
I took a bike, and I did a feedback sports trainer, and I did 45-minute workouts, either like VO2 max, shorts, or I think I did like 2-minute intervals, and then or I did 45 minutes of easy spinning.
Cool.
I did it every day except after the morning that I got drunk at Epcot. And yeah, Chad, you'd like that. You go around the world.
I don't think I would.
No, this is cool. It's just like, it's like you walk through different countries and there's different drinks based on that country.
Oh.
And then there's really good restaurants in between, like actually
That's
good
like
restaurants.
I'm listening.
Nah, I like that.
Yeah.
That sounds really good.
And then everyone who works there is from that country, which is kind of fun. So in Japan, it's all Japanese people. In Italy, it's all Italian people, which is kind of fun too.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyways, I did that, and that helped a
Feedback
lot.
Sports Omnium. Sorry, because they
Yep.
have a couple ones. So the Omnium, right? The one
Yeah.
with resistance on it. Okay, cool.
I made one mistake. I traveled on American Airlines, and I put the trainer in my bike bag. And American Airlines bikes are only $25, like a regular bag, unless it's over 50 pounds. And because I put it in my bike bag, it was over 50 pounds. And because of the way I put it in, like getting it out at the airport would be
Just not
extremely,
really, yeah.
extremely hard.
Yeah.
So I should have just checked that as a regular bag, or even I think you can carry on that one. And I could have saved. I wouldn't have to pay the bike fee.
Yeah.
So that's a pro tip. So look for that. I think other bike, like Southwest, I believe, I got in an argument with a guy before with this. It's if you pay the $75, it can be over 50 pounds.
Yes, you can.
I had to pull up the website, remember? It was from
Yeah.
Interbike,
Yeah.
and he was like, nope. And I was like, I pulled up their website and showed it to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I take advantage of that regularly when I fly with my bike. I stuff everything
Yeah,
into my bike bag.
Yeah.
Jonathan's very much like, I only brought a backpack. And then his bike bag's like 125 pounds.
It's great.
You're such a light packer.
I know, right? Yeah, kind of. So we talked about you at Dirty Kansas.
Oh, yeah.
And since you weren't here, I wanted to give you an opportunity to chime in on anything that you feel like we missed out on, or perhaps we misrepresented you in some way.
No, you guys did a good job. I just don't know what the goal should be because, like, finish, I don't really like.
That's a good goal.
Yeah, but I don't like those kind of goals. Because then
Yeah,
it's just
but-
I think
like,
with a race like that, it's
You're done to
Honestly,
finish.
it's different. For a race like that, that's a different kind of, like, that's a very legitimate goal. I'm not kidding.
yeah. Well, that is a good goal, but I don't. That doesn't give me the fire in my belly.
Yeah,
How about
exactly.
that?
Yeah,
I'm
That-
like,
okay, that's a fair
Yeah.
point.
Because the point is, like, the goal is, regardless of for any single person going into this, the goal is to finish. Like, nobody's going into this and being like, maybe I won't. Like, everyone wants to finish it, right? So, like, and sure, it's really difficult, but everybody wants to finish it.
I
But
think
you
a
kinda
time
need
goal
some
could be
more.
a good idea, but even with that, you have to have the mental caveat of the conditions and the weather are going to make such a huge difference. So the plus or minus on that would be relatively large.
yeah, if it's muddy, I think I'll just get back on the plane and go. Because I've heard like some years it's like really hard, muddy.
Yeah.
So what I don't want is mechanicals, like flats, because that would just be horrible.
Yeah.
I hear some people having like 5 or 6 flats during
And a
the day.
lot of that's not within your control.
I know exactly,
Yeah.
but I just don't want that. It is with the
It
my
is,
tire choice,
yeah.
but I
Right.
also don't want to have like this beefy tire that like it's just going to make me go slow the whole time.
You might like the beefy tire.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Just
Yeah.
go for it.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, it's you're better off.
Like a DHF
No.
downhill. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm
It's a
saying.
bit extreme, Nate.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not going.
Downhill tires a bit extreme.
I would go to the EXO snake skin, like the protection layer. I'm not doing like a super like skinny tire. I think I was going to do the Vittoria Torino Dry 38 millimeter graphene 2.0.
That
tire.
sounds.
dangerous.
I think the key.
Really? That
38
sounds like a good choice.
38's a good choice.
I think the key with the tire is so like, don't get me wrong, you can run the risky side of things and it's totally within the spectrum of like a good choice, I guess you could say. But I would be looking for something with some tread down the center, kind of like what you're talking about with Vittoria, just because if you're just running a slick and you think of a rock puncturing in, if it just happens to be so lucky as to go through the tread rather than just, the bare tire in between the tread, that's a bit more protection.
And there are parts of the course where the tread really does help.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So granted, it'd be slower, and when you're going into raw or into flat road sections or anything else, but man, like the thing is, I know that if you were to have 1, 2, 3 flats, and I swear it seems like if you get one flat, it's just like the floodgates open, right? Yeah. But really, it's not just the time lost with the flat, but it's the frustration that you get, or the fatigue, or just the mental game, how it completely switches because suddenly you feel like things are against you rather than things
Makes
are for you.
Makes a hard day quite a bit harder.
Yeah, it really does. Like, you may actually be slower. Like, let's say you get one flat, but you run faster tires, or you don't get a flat, but you run slower tires. You may be faster with that flat. I don't know. That's really tough to say, but it's probably going to be a much more enjoyable day. When you don't
I think
have
this is
those
a good,
problems.
in the middle. It has good. I've looked at puncture tests, and it's pretty good. It's not the best, but a lot of no one runs slicks that I've seen.
No.
Gravel Kings, very common. Riddlers. There's a Maxxis one too, but I forget. Anyways,
Yeah. I think they have I feel like a lot of people use the Rambler.
that's it. Yep.
Yeah.
The Rambler.
And it's got tread on the top.
Yeah,
Yep.
I ran the Mavic all-road 38s, and those were really nice.
That's
I
a
think that
really
was
good tire
perfect.
choice, actually.
Yeah.
That's a really good one. Because that one has it's fast, at least by appearance's sake, which who knows, that can always be tricky with that. But because it doesn't have a bunch of crazy knobs, but it does have, and it's kind of like a
just enough.
thicker tire because of the tread blocks are really big, I guess, in terms of surface area, not height.
Exactly.
I'm putting the cart before the horse. I'm not in, so if anyone can get me in, but I'll just keep doing it.
But it's a lot of fun to talk about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I went on the plane. I think from Orlando to Phoenix. All I did was Google dirty can stuff.
Yeah.
So the next one I want to make sure that I do is this is more in my control. Is make sure my back is okay, because so many race reports I read are like they did well, and then after 9 hours their back locked up and then they couldn't pedal, so their fitness just got annihilated, or not annihilated, but what is it? Put to the side.
It's a good back seat.
It didn't matter. Yeah, it took a back seat to it because their back wasn't good, and just walking around Disney World for a lot, my lower back started to tighten up, and that's not a good sign for that. So more deadlifts, full body stuff to try to get my back really healthy, and my neck.
Arms too. I remember
Those are fine. Just kidding.
Have you seen
This guy.
For me, I don't know. It's not something I focus on in my training. So I was just really tired of holding myself up on the bike. And that was the year Ted King was running the aero bars. And there were so many times where I was like, man, I would kill for some aero bars right now.
Just a different position, right?
Just a different position.
Yeah.
Not even for the air resistance. It was just I just don't want to be holding myself up anymore.
You get a canyon, you can get lost in positions with those things, with those crazy bars.
My gosh.
Can we talk a little bit about the back thing? Because that's actually a really common question that we get. People say why does my back get fatigued? That sort of a thing. And it's interesting that you mentioned the arms, Nate, you mentioned the back. And I feel like there are a number of contributing factors. And this is just anecdotal. I feel like just me sharing my experience with it. When I'm not keeping up on just my core training in general, I feel that fatigue in plenty of different spots. Even though that may be where the problem is, because I'm not holding myself properly on the bike. I don't have the strength and or coordination trained to be able to hold myself on that bike. So early season long rides, that sort of thing, it's common for my back to definitely get that. Also, if I'm really putting out a ton of power and I'm fighting for traction. So that's an example, which, I mean, if it's muddy, you'll definitely probably be in that position. But even cyclocross races, I've had times where in a 45-minute cyclocross race, but it's really slippery, that my back is super fatigued. And it's because you maintain so much tension throughout your whole body when you're doing that. But people also do that when they just put out a lot of power. So I feel like one of the things, especially with a day like this, consistency is key in terms of sticking to your pacing plan, not being all over the place and surging really hard. I'm sure that could help. But you do, as you mentioned, deadlifts and that sort of stuff to try to help. Do you notice a difference when you start incorporating that?
It's huge. And you know what? I've been doing trap bar deadlifts, and those work my legs better, but those do not help my lower back like regular straight bar deadlifts do. And I need to go back to straight bar deadlifts. What'd you say?
It's just not that deep a bend.
Exactly, yeah. And I kind of like that because then it gets more of my quads.
Loading your spine is a good idea too. So just front squats, back squats,
Weight vest.
Anything that, weight vest, but weight vest in terms of endurance.
Yeah, where's
why
your
not?
weight vest?
What are you talking about? Oh, if you want to see that sort of stuff, check out my Instagram.
Yes.
NPEARSON99. There is a new picture of Chad on there. I asked you guys not to tell him what it is.
Yeah.
And it's the only time that you smile. That's what you can figure it out. So that's it.
It was captured.
It was captured.
It was
The only
captured.
time
He's
I've
smiling.
ever-
Yeah, that's
Ch-
he's doing it right now
Chad
because of,
smiles all the time.
well,
Yeah.
only when this thing happens. So
When I'm drinking beer,
anyway, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I won't though because I don't go on Instagram.
I know you won't. That's okay.
That's true. Yeah.
I'm doing like a little thing with everybody. So on the
Okay.
podcast.
Back things really quick.
That's
though,
it for
Okay,
me.
one other thing that I would say on that too is like, and I know that this seems basic, but on the bike fit side of things, I see like a lot of people make sort of like concessions based on the genre of riding they're doing. Like for example, they're like, I have my road bike like this, but then my mountain bike like this, or my cross bike or gravel bike like this. And a lot of the time, usually, I feel like you end up seeing a lower saddle position with anything off road because people like to have. Whether it's a bit more clearance when things get steep and rowdy, or if it's just because it feels a little bit more stable and comfortable to them. But I mean, if you're switching back and forth and you have an unfamiliar position from one bike to the next, it's something that, I mean, you shouldn't be surprised if you feel effects, right? From
Yeah.
something like that. So,
Millimeters matter.
yeah, they do, especially when you're talking about 200 miles on gravel.
The next thing is bike. I don't want to ride my Crux there.
Yeah.
And one reason is I want a more slacked out gravel bike. I think that just makes me feel better on the descents. And there's descending at
Yeah,
Dirty
for sure.
Kansas. And I don't want to hit my brakes once, like the whole race.
Like rain rutted out too, right? Like
Yeah.
It
it's
can
sort of
be. I was really lucky the year I raced, it was really dry. Although we did have a storm pass through. I mean, it's a lot of loose stuff. And there are, some rain ruts.
with like washes at the bottom too,
Yeah.
I've heard too.
So that's
then-
perfect. Like the loose stuff with the slacked out head tube angle,
Yeah,
it
you
feels
float
so
it.
much better with my new pivot compared to my Epic. So I really liked my Epic on switchbacks, but then descending, I didn't feel as comfortable. Now on my pivot descending, I'm just like, it feels amazing.
So
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah,
right?
and I make up a lot of time descending on that, and I want that same experience on my gravel bike.
The Mach 4
Yeah.
SL is the one I'm sure people will
Yeah.
ask. So Mach 4 SL is what you have. Yeah.
So I'm thinking, I looked at all the head tube angles, and you're wearing a Cannondale shirt, and I'm thinking about, I looked at them, and the most slack one that I could find was the, Slate? Is that what it
No,
is?
Topstone.
Topstone. God,
Yeah.
I always say it wrong.
Yeah.
And
Slate was a bike, but Topstone is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Slate is a bike.
Yeah.
the Topstone also has, I can put a dropper post in it.
Yeah.
And that's very important to me because on those, when it's rutted out, to be able to like kind of get that bike body separation a lot easier is cool. And I think with what's the dropper you can put on a road bike, the skinnier 27.2?
20. Well, yeah, but does-
K-Lev.
KS Lev.
KS Lev, yeah.
Do we know offhand if the Cannondale has the 25.4 seat post diameter or the 27.2?
I should
Because
know that, I don't
Cannondale
know.
frequently uses a 25.4, like on my CAD 12 that I have. It's a 25.4, which is tough because you can't get a dropper post in 25.4.
I thought, really?
Topstone you can, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, cool. I hope
Cool.
so.
Yeah,
I might
hopefully
change
if
all
they
my
use
plans.
27.2, then you're dialed.
Yeah.
Honestly, though, I wish that like on my gravel bike, I wish it had a 30.9 seat post diameter because then I could just run the wireless dropper. Oh, it'd be so much easier. Like I wouldn't have to run cables. Wouldn't have
Life
to do
is
any of that.
really hard.
It's, I mean, a first world problem of the nth degree. But it would be so nice to be able to just, because it's a pain trying to hook things up and then you have to repurpose a shifter. And then if you go with you have to go with mechanical then if that's what you're going to do. Or you
Nope.
have to run a separate dropper.
No. There is the Di2 Gravel GRX has the ability to do a wire dropper in your left
Cool.
your left paddle
Yeah.
if you have a one
Cool.
by.
Yeah.
This is all the plain
This is
research.
so exciting.
Yeah.
But, okay, so it'll be electric on one side, then it'll be mechanical on the other.
Something like that. I don't understand how it works, but it said you can use a dropper with it, and you just have to make sure that it's cabled.
Yeah, so you probably have to get like one cabled shifter and then one electric, I would assume.
I don't know.
Yeah, different
I'll-
guts, one would think. So
I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Find out.
and then a 1-to-1 gear ratio in the back. I think that's plenty for gravel races. Maybe.
Yeah.
Right?
I would think so.
Does DK have steep climbs at all?
I don't think so, but
They're
I don't-
not. When I raced it, there was
you
one
did it.
really steep one. But I would say that even the less steep ones, they're punchy and they take it out of you. So if you have you're, as my friend and former teammate Janelle would say, never met a gear I didn't like. And when you're out there, you're not going to be sad if you have more gears.
So that brings me to my next point is being in groups. And like if you have gears, why ride it punchy? But if I'm with like 10 people and I look back and I can't see anybody, because I know talking to race reports, it gets stretched out over 200 miles. I know you don't always see other people at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if I want to wait 5 minutes for the next group rather than put out an extra minute of power. Like you don't know like what's better.
It's going to start to you'll start to feel it.
That worries
but
me.
it
200
also
miles in.
also riding
100
solo,
miles in,
you start to feel it too. If you're in a group of 10, you can just like go 2 more miles per hour faster.
I know that
with
this
less
is like
watts.
an extreme example, but I'd rather ride solo at a sustainable pace than ride over my head with a group on a day like that.
Well, not over your head. There's the thing where
Here's the tricky thing. You say not over your head, but because it doesn't feel like you're over your head. Like you said, they're punchy, right?
Yeah.
And then add up the thousands of little punches that you do over 200 miles, and it's definitely over your head. Like it's not over your head in the moment, but it's just,
I think there's a time where maybe for 6 hours, my normalized power is like 220, and I'm, let's say, 10 minutes faster with a group, or I could have the same normalized power at 220, but I'm like 10 minutes slower by myself. It's because you put a little bit more on some of the climbs, but then on the flats, you put out less.
There are going to be huge stretches where you're just alone. Like that's just going to be how it is. And I think you have to be really picky about the groups that you're in. And that was one of the things, I mean, like there were plenty of people that I would ride with that were like really surging up the climbs. And I mean, honestly, over that distance, in many cases, you might actually be better off on your own. Yep. Because, for example, I was in a group and I'm trying to remember who. Anyway, there were like 3 guys in this group that were just punching every hill, and it was just driving me bonkers.
I'll
like,
let them go.
Yeah.
Stop, guys.
So I let them go, and of course, like my pace up the hills was slower, and then I was a little faster downhill, so I was keeping in more even tempo, and sure enough, ended up catching 2 or 3 of them, several miles up the road. So I think making sure that on the other hand, like on the second stretch, I actually found my new friend Jason. Hi, Jason. And we rode that whole 50-mile section together because we were both on the same page about we are not surging this. And we were so relieved to find each other because it was somebody that we could ride with, have a conversation with, but we weren't like really beating each other up with those surges.
I think my inclination on a day that's going to be that long, and I know it's going to be that long, would be to spend the first half of it, so the first 100 miles, thinking this is too slow. This is too slow. This has to be too slow.
Yeah, you want to think that.
And then just pay for it on the second half. If it is too slow, okay, then I finish with something in the tank. But over a 200-mile day, I don't think that's possible. I don't think you're going to finish with anything left.
Yeah.
So I think what I'll do.
So let's
this
Nate
is
tell
all
us why it's all wrong.
Let's just assume that it's happening. One, if you're going to ride with me, let's just smooth out the hills, okay? I'll just say it right now.
Yeah,
I'll
seriously.
I'll yell at people, or
They'll
not
listen
yell at people, suggest.
They'll listen to that, I'm sure.
Well, here's what you get is on the flats, I'm a high-ish FTP rider, and I'm a really good draft. So if you put out a little less power on the uphills, I'll help pull you on the flats, and we'll probably go faster overall.
I like this, the draft mercenary.
Yeah.
No, it's true though. Jonathan, tell me, like,
it's great.
behind me, I'm a better draft.
Yeah,
Especially the other thing, I'm going to wear all aero stuff because in some parts of
so
Dirty
much
Kansas,
on a day like
you get a 20 mile per hour headwind,
I can
and you're
imagine.
going 15 miles per hour. That's like 35 miles per hour effective headwind.
When your average speed I don't know what it'll be, but somewhere in between 15 and 20 miles an hour, I'm sure. So, I mean, that's where aerodynamics makes a difference. And if you think about it, like one thing that a lot of people misunderstand is the more time you spend out there, the greater the effect, right? So, and that's a long day. I don't care who you are. It's a long
I'm
day.
completely for
It's
that.
going to make a difference, but when you're actually out there, you are not going to be thinking about aerodynamics.
Well,
No, but
just
I mean,
the
if you're
equipment
choosing the
choices,
equipment,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you
Aero
choose
helmet,
it beforehand.
skin
and
suit.
Then,
Yeah.
you'll be more concerned about your back than you will about being really low on the bike.
I'm not probably ever going to get in the drops.
No.
Because it's just my back won't, and my arms, that will, even with these, they won't. Just kidding.
I'm sure. I can't.
My wife's listening, just rolling her eyes.
Podcast canceled. This is too much.
It was just a joke.
I'm sure you'll use the drops
cycling.
though. The one thing I'm sure you'll use the drops just for the change of position, right? Like, but you won't be like using them because you'll be trying to get like the most advantage of speed or something like that.
I would like to save the drops until like there is a 30 mile or a headwind that's like 15 miles per hour, something like that, because it's tiring.
And there are times too when the drops are a relief just because I've been in the tops or hoods for so long. It's like
changing
a wrist
position.
They've never
wrist
been a
thing
relief for
or
me.
something, you know.
They're always harder. And then I don't know, here's what I think in my mind. First hour, put out a little more power because there are some groups that are going to slow down and like separation will occur. And maybe, she's probably too fast for me, but maybe just try to hang out by Allison Tetrick.
Friend of the podcast. She's been on the podcast before.
She's won the women's one. She knows how to race it. She knows how to like not go out too hard. Like I feel like if I'm climbing close to her, and I think maybe our power to weights might be pretty similar. I'm not sure, maybe around there. She probably has a better power to weight, but I'm probably better on the flats. If I can keep up with that, I feel like she won't like totally destroy herself or just like attack every climb and then just coast.
How do they stage an event like this though? Can you get next to her?
Yeah.
Are you gonna?
So
Yeah.
they,
Mix-
yeah,
can
they kind of
mix all
stage
together.
it. So
Okay.
she'll get a call up, but then they'll stage it sort of based on like how it's on the honor system. So how long do you think it's going to take you today? And you kind of go with that wave. And there is I don't know, like a 2K stretch before the first corner into the gravel. And even then nobody goes berserker there. I mean, it's good to weave your way up and be in position for that corner if you can. But that first hour goes really hard. It doesn't right away, but when it goes really hard. And they switch up the course every year, so it kind of depends on the terrain. But Allison goes really hard too.
Where were you? Did you get a call up?
No, I didn't have a call up.
So when you say it goes really hard, was the amateurs that you were riding with, or were you moving through and then you kind of got up to the front group and that
So
was going
I got
hard?
up to I was like 10th wheel through the first corner, and then just stayed floating in the top 15 wheels probably for most of the first hour.
So you were the the front group.
So I was with the front group, but I mean, so we were with. I mean, Ted King and Josh were in that group, and then who else? Then Allison and Katie were in that group. I mean,
yeah,
it's a fast group. And honestly, when you look at KJs over the course of the day, the main bulk of KJs are there. And then you can kind of see, like, there's a steep drop off after that. I mean, the second 50-mile leg, you can hold it pretty well, but then there's a very steep drop off in the third and fourth. So it's not really an even pace. And so even if you're dead set on staying with that group, you really have to be prepared to go deep and just know that you're going to have to stuff your face the rest of the day.
You're
and
not
keep
staying
up
with
on.
that group though, so you won't be with the front group.
Allison's not in the front group too. She doesn't stay with like the World Tour people.
At least she hasn't recently, I don't think. But yeah,
Not for the whole race,
yeah.
but basically it's just an attrition thing. Like the longer that you can hang in, the better, because the more likely you are to be with a group of people that are drafting or that have a draft for you to stick with.
I looked at Jeff Kabush's and Ted King's power, like on climbs and stuff. And beginning, they were doing like 275 for the long climb. And Ted King's maybe I'm 10 pounds heavier than Ted King. Yeah, so that put me at like 290 maybe, 285, which is not threshold, but it's enough to wear you down.
Oh,
over the
yeah.
day. But then other times, later on in the day with the World Tour people, it was like 400 watts for like 10 minutes. I'm like, that I cannot.
It's amazing.
Don't want to do.
Yeah, I know. It's very impressive.
So one thing that like I feel like with these sort of races, with the amateurs and how the amateurs race them, they almost like make everything more severe, right? Like when they start out like that, like it's really intense for the first little bit, and then that cliff is really pronounced.
Yes.
And then it's truly survival thereafter a lot of the time, just because it's, whether it's the feeding strategy, the fitness, the pacing strategy, any number of the different things that can add up into that. So one thing that that's, I guess, worth consideration is if you are doing something if you're planning on sticking to something that is steady and really sticking to that, you will get past in the beginning. But chances are you won't be the last rider on course. Chances are, hopefully not.
Very, very unlikely.
Right. So even though you do get past, you'll likely work your way through, kind of like I did at Leadville. It was ridiculous in the beginning, like way too fast. And then I just stayed steady. And then even on the first climb, it was already just moving forward through. And most of the day was just spent moving forward because of that first block was so intense I didn't go with that. But that was actually motivating and helpful in the sense that, there were stretches definitely where I was very alone, but I was moving my way through. So I'm just thinking of the people that are listening to this that are, average folks that maybe aren't going to be toward, they don't know where they'll be in
What's
the
the
group.
time cutoff?
For Kansas?
Yeah.
Not sure, but I think it's like something about dark. Isn't that?
No,
is that this race?
that's a
or
goal. So I was
different
going to
Yeah,
say
people
that could,
finish after dark. Yeah.
one? Okay.
I think it's like someone type it in, but I think it's like 17 hours or so
Yeah.
it's huge.
Long
One of the goals is to beat the sun, and I think that should be that's a good goal
That's a
for
good
me
goal.
is to beat
Yeah.
the sun. And then 2, I'm not going to go like all out like a road race at the beginning.
Yeah.
If Ted King and stuff are doing 270, 280 on that climb, that's not threshold for me. I can do that for a long time, and just try not to. Pretty much after that first part, I want to not ever go above threshold for the rest of the 14 more hours I have left or whatever.
Yeah.
And just try to be, and even I'm probably not even sweet spot. Maybe sweet spot on some of the short climbs, and very aerobic after that. What do you think's a good IF for 12-hour race? I don't even know how fast.
6.5?
Yeah,
to-
6.5
I was saying
maybe.
0.65. Yeah.
Yeah.
That first hour can be like 0.8, 0.9.
Oh, I'm sure it will be.
Yeah.
And then it's just going to tank. But
Yeah.
0.65.
Yeah.
And then for training, it's tough because our weather could be good or bad by then. I'm going to try to do a lot of this on the trainer, and I do want to do some longer outside rides.
A lot of it
5,
is
6
for,
hours.
Yeah.
and we get this question all the time, like, can I squeeze in some longer rides outside or some outside rides with my trainer, that sort of thing? And yeah, absolutely, the answer is yes. You can substitute them for like a Saturday workout or follow a lower volume plan, so then your weekends free up and you can add that in just at your own
And if you're going
discretion.
to do something as long as Dirty Kansas, you have to do some long rides on the bike. There are a lot of things you're not going to figure out on a trainer, even if you sit on a trainer for 5 hours, that you will figure out if you go outside for 5 hours.
It's less fitness, more about your body's ability to hold itself, like we were talking about earlier, or the equipment sort of things. Like
Yeah,
you
there's
may
just
love your
weird
saddle
stuff
until
that happens after 5 hours. Most of the training I was doing was between like 3 and 4 hours a day, but I did do, I think, 2 8-hour rides and a 10-hour ride.
I probably won't do that because that will destroy me.
Yeah.
Which is bad news.
You're likely to do
By the time you do it, I mean, I was surprised, like, because I kind of thought it was very daunting for me, and I was surprised. It really wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be. You might surprise yourself.
How do you brace for an 8-hour ride? Are you going out with people?
No.
It's just such a
I had some
long
really
day to
good
be alone.
podcasts.
Welcome to pro life.
I should do, exactly. I should do 8 hours on the trainer on like a Friday.
That's a terrible idea.
That would be awesome.
No, that's a
Think
terrible
of the Instagram
idea.
likes.
I'd rather,
Yeah. Oh,
I'd
yeah.
rather just
People
quit
would love
bike
it.
racing entirely than do that.
Then do 8 hours, period. So here's the deal. Getting back to that. The point is, when you're training for something like this, the point of those integrating something that is similar to the elements, that sort of thing, is because this is an excessively long event where I deem it excessive, excessively
that's
long
a
event.
fair assessment.
That's going to bring out things, like you said, Amber, that you just wouldn't notice otherwise in terms of equipment, nutrition, something like that.
Yeah, even figuring out like how your stomach is responding to the things you're eating.
Totally. It might be different when you're bumpy all day versus smooth. So
Yeah.
so that's kind of the intent behind that. And you can totally work that in. And that's the sort of thing that, you can do. And that's why it's so great. And we always recommend following like a slightly lower volume plan and then leaving your weekends for that sort of stuff, or the drop ride, something like that. It's a good way to do it.
2 more quick things. First, you say you have to ride alone. I thought about this, and then I was like, no, people will hate you. And I'm not going to do it. But like hire a Jeff Kabush something to base me. I was like, you could probably hire like a couple pros. Like
Jeff's ears perked up right
it's
there.
just like Silicon Valley. They have that exact thing.
Totally,
Like the
yes.
guy, he has like a whole graph bag and he hires a bunch of people.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
get all the pro riders do that. That'd be really horrible. I'm not doing that. That's like, why even do it then?
Yeah.
2, will you be my Swanee, Jonathan?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be there.
We have some learnings from
Leadville.
Leadville.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think we can improve on.
Totally.
The other thing, someone write this in, but I think you can hire mechanical packages,
Yes.
like from third parties.
Cool.
Just
Yeah.
you are a good mechanic, but there's that like
Oh, I don't want to do that on race
that
day.
pro mechanic, like you said, that they fix things in like 45 seconds.
It's amazing what they can do.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've kind of like had a rule too. I don't want to touch my CEO's bike anymore too. I don't want to be like liable for
There's
something.
been a
that, like-
couple of bad things that have happened.
Yes. Yeah, I don't want to be. Yeah, exactly.
So, anyways, that will be good. But you're good at directions, which is hard.
Sure.
Oh, the other thing, my other goal, the 2 goals I control: my back, and I don't want to get lost.
Are you going to do the
because-
backpack thing from Garmin? You can do like your Edge because you have that 1030.
Mine lasts 18 hours.
Well, no, but doing navigation, it drops it down a lot.
I actually
So I
ran
think a
an
lot of
external
them-
battery pack on
Yeah.
the bike. Yeah.
And Garmin now has one that goes into the bottom of the mount that still transfers battery power. It's like a battery backpack.
Yeah. So I'll ask the Garmin people. They do this a lot. The Garmin Edge, product manager, does this ride like a lot, and he aims for like top 50. Which
fast.
So I'll find out if it lasts for Dirty Kansas with navigation or not.
I
But
think
if
that's
not,
what they do.
I will use the pack, and I'll just I probably won't use it at the beginning, and then I'll put it on at one of the aid stations.
Yeah.
To keep it safe a little bit of weight.
As I remember, I think that was one of like at least the marketing story behind that little battery backpack was that like for big events like Dirty Kansas that are using nav. Because I know that like when I use navigation on my head unit, the battery's like half of what it is.
Well, and there's not great reception out there.
Yeah. So you don't have.
So that's a good idea to have a little extra battery juice.
Yeah, you have to have the route loaded beforehand. The course is not marked, right?
No.
Yeah, so you really have to know.
Why can't they just put arrows up?
Part of the adventure?
It's part of the adventure. You got. I mean, honestly, it's part of the culture being self-sufficient.
Yeah, I think that's.
But they do actually have volunteers out at most of the corners that are pointing which way to go. So you'll be surprised at how well supported you are, not just by the people that show up like Jonathan for you, but everybody there. I mean, everyone's looking out for everyone.
I've taken many a wrong turn in races, even when it's marked.
Yeah.
Another reason for me to be in a group.
Yes.
Because that could save me. I did it
Totally.
24 hours. I went like 10 minutes in the wrong way. And I had my power PR on those 10 minutes on the way out.
And that's great. There's two reasons why like that's important too, because once you get 200 or 100 miles into this thing, 150 miles in, like nothing starts to make sense anymore.
No, it's true. Yeah.
And then on top of that, even
goes off the rails.
Yeah, you're relying on navigation. Like, so cue the Michael Scott office scene, right? But like with that, like things can go wrong with that. So yeah, that is a really good point on making sure you have people there.
The other thing that's going to be really fun is you guys can practice the transitions. So this was really cool. Like, so my husband was running support for me, and we were at the hotel, and we had, we actually went outside and did dry runs of this. So like he had the cooler with the hydration packs, and we were like, I'd roll in, jump off, get the hydration pack, and he was standing there with a stopwatch going, run it again. It was so much fun.
I like it.
At Leadville, I think we were under 60 seconds.
Oh yeah.
we were good.
We got it down to 30 seconds.
Nice. I
Not competitive.
I differ.
You're pro though.
I differ in this degree. Chad and I both kind of noticed at Leadville, and especially you this year, that it's better to be chill because the 30 seconds that you take there are going to pay off in keeping everything calm and because that's so key. If you lose your mind,
I just don't want to lose a group by 30 seconds
no.
and then have to chase back.
One of the things that they told us, and honestly this proved to be true, is one of the best things you can do in transition is to give your rider a hug.
Yeah, for
I don't
sure.
want a hug.
Chad embraced me warmly at Leadville every
couple times. I could tell he needed it.
No, but there's something
legit,
to that,
man.
There's
It's
something
real.
to that, like just talking to the person. I'm not saying like
Nate's
actual
shaking
hug.
his head.
I'm not gonna hug you, don't worry. But the just keeping like I guess a sense of normalcy because we get so kind of out of a normal state in the mind when you go through, and it's nice to check in. And
It's got to feel a bit isolating too, even if you're with a group.
yeah.
It's very you are very much in your own head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have another idea is I might wear my Apple Watch and I might like call you or text you if I need a special thing coming in.
It's a sort of race where you can probably do that, right?
Yeah,
like
if
as long as
there's
you have
reception,
service.
Yeah, because I can kind of like talk on it while I'm riding.
That's a good idea.
Or you could. I know there's probably a no headphone rule, but you could snake something.
No,
and
you can.
you can have headphones.
Yeah.
In your piece, yeah.
Oh yeah, so I could put an earpiece in and just call. That'd probably work even better.
Yeah.
If there's an issue.
Sure.
Like, hey, I need a derailleur hanger.
Yeah.
Is like.
Yeah.
I called David to let him know that I'd crashed, and I was like my day's over, it's done. But he was in the pit with other people who'd done the race before, and they're like, in this race, honestly, it's hard to wrap your mind around it as a road racer, but I mean, gaps of 2 hours are not insurmountable on a day like this.
Yeah.
So, it was sort of like come into the pit, let's see. I mean, doesn't necessarily mean the day's over. So
I'm going to call Chad and just chat. How's your day, Chad?
Just shoot the breeze.
Chad will give you workout text instructions while you're going through.
Drop shoulders, man.
It'd be so
Well,
good.
anyways, it's probably enough on this, but
It's exciting.
I hope I get in, and the final goal is to not be trashed for 3 years.
Yeah.
Like I still want to do Cape Epic. I want to do this next thing we're going to talk about.
If you
I
don't,
like it like 2 weeks. Come back. I'm not going to go as deep as Leadville. If I have a big blow up, I'm going to go 80 watts the whole way in.
Yeah.
Or say, Jonathan, pick
pick me up. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you
Not
have
worth
more
it.
important goals down the road.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to prioritize that sort of thing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be exciting. If you don't make it in, our podcast army of listeners are going to be like so
Can
angry
you,
at
like-
DK
Yeah,
at the
I'm gonna-
event. You know,
try
they're
my
letting
best.
like roadies gone grodies like every day, and then they may be giving away Nate spots. So yeah,
They're way more important than me, but I want to do it.
I don't know. I think more people actually might be following your performance through a day like that than a lot of them.
We could have a huge group.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
4 watt per kilo group. All of us who are 4 watts per kilo, like get together and we're going to stick together.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take care of each other.
Yeah.
You know,
We could have a group of like 50 people.
pass the snacks if
That'd be
needed.
amazing.
Pass the snacks.
Yeah. We could say every
Mantra for
stop
the
too,
day.
we're going to be like, it's going to be a 2-minute stop, everybody.
Yeah.
So don't go out until that 2 minutes. We don't like.
It's a good plan.
Yeah. Because that extra minute, make sure you get everything. It's not going to impact our race outcome, but then no one has to chase.
Yeah.
And we'll be stronger together.
There you go.
Stronger together, people.
That's it. Can we talk about another race?
Yes.
This
one's
one's important
awesome.
to talk about here.
Yeah, this is good news.
Masters National Championships, Road National Championships here in the United States is going to be in Cedar City, Utah.
It's just next door to us.
Yeah, just next door.
But it is.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah.
a drive. I don't have to pack 2 bikes on a plane.
Sure.
Whoa,
Yeah.
How long is that
That's
drive?
nice.
It's pretty long. It's about I think
Anything under 15 hours is doable for
I
me.
think it's about 11 hours, maybe 12, somewhere around there. If you do that,
Let's
you may
fly
be
it.
able to shortcut it a little by cutting across a lower section of Nevada. But yeah. So basically, Cedar City, Utah. If you've watched the tour of Utah, it's kind of a lot of the courses look like they have been, or these courses look like it covers a portion of that.
Cool.
So it should be familiar in that regard.
8 hours.
8 hours and 41 minutes. That's not bad.
It's just Salt Lake.
Perfect.
Boom.
So anyways, the course looks like it could suit you, Chad. The TT course.
Yeah,
Ooh.
so I like everything I've seen so far. It's a pretty flat, out and back, hard turnaround, just like Satley and Loyalton.
Yeah, it kind of descends down.
Like the elevation's the
net
same?
descend. Like you drop down and at the turnaround, then you come back up,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
I
That
prefer that, actually.
that would really punish a person that doesn't pace well,
yeah.
right? So that's interesting, and it's almost 40K, right?
Yeah, it's real close. Like 39
38.
and change.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So this is good for Chad.
So
it's everything I wanted in a time trial. So this is, I probably couldn't have designed it better myself.
Pretty exciting.
1,800 meters, 5,800 feet. So that's right at the elevation where you're going to have like the maximum speed
Yeah.
Yeah.
for air density to losing air for aerobic power.
And it's only subtly off our elevation.
And
It's enough where like you're going to be like, I'm having a slightly bad day. It's like 1,500 feet higher than us or 1,200 feet.
if the weather is the normal weather, which weather is not known to be, but just
Sure.
the same, if it is, then that should mean too that you're more than likely, if there is wind, to have a tailwind coming back because the storms move across, west to east there. So you go into the wind in the downhill section
Yeah.
if there is wind, and then you would be coming back with a
That'd be
tailwind.
fun.
Yeah.
So
I assume you're doing it.
Yeah.
Yes. So the bummer is this is the same weekend as Rooted Vermont. I know.
Yeah. So,
Sad.
yeah, sad day. I can't do this. So I'm at Rooted Vermont.
All
That's
right,
for
me
darn
too.
sure.
Why can't you do it?
So I'm not old enough. to do
Oh,
Masters.
65,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, just
Still
us.
not old enough. Yeah.
Just a peanut.
I swear that 30, 34 age group figures in every now and again.
I know,
I
right?
don't
It's weird.
find
It
any
seems
rhyme or reason to
inconsistent.
it.
Yeah, if anybody know, I mean, there are many mysteries surrounding USAC races, organizations, points, everything else. But if anybody knows, I feel like I've seen 30 to 34, but I know that in mountain biking sometimes they do that. So I don't know if I'm just getting it confused in my head.
This is a good
Just
course
be
to
a-
get your sub 50-minute 40K TT.
Yeah.
38K.
For sure.
We're gonna count that.
Chad goes past the finish line for a little bit. Just, I'm on a good one.
I may actually do that.
No way.
That would be awesome.
So, okay, so both of us are planning on doing that. And then what about road nats?
Yeah, so
So is crit there too, or just
crit and road all in the same spot. The crit looks like the circuit that they've done in the Tour of Utah, but I could be totally wrong. It goes around a university down there, and it's kind of like it feels like it's kind of in a depression, so to speak, like that region in terms of geographically speaking, or topographically, not like economically or something. Anyways, but like it's kind of like in a bit of a valley there. So I feel like I remember there being like subtle elevation gain in that course, not a lot, but enough to kind of like sap the sort of uphill that it's enough to sap the legs if you're pushing a little too hard.
That's not good.
But yeah, it's certainly not climbing, I would say. It's just kind of like
It's not
It's
flat.
a pretty basic course too. Just like
Yeah.
I think it's just 4 corners, 4 left turns.
Yep. Yeah, pretty straightforward.
I turn left better, so that's good.
Nice. Ambi Turner. And then if you do the road race, it looks like it looks super spiky on the profile, but when you look at it, it's actually not that much climbing. I want to say that it's somewhere, and I'm afraid that if I click a link, I'll get lost in the USAC labyrinth here, but I think that it's like 490 or somewhere around like 500 feet of climbing a lap, something like that. And I think that you do 5 or 6 laps. And then you return on a climb coming
legit.
back. Yeah, it's certainly enough to hurt, but it's also not like a pure climber's course. It doesn't look like that. So if anything, it looks like it's going to be really exposed to wind. So that teamwork is really important in that regard, because it's kind of like out with a long kind of allowance to a big mountain that's off to the west, southwest, which is where the wind will come from. So
Well, are you going to do the road and crit Nats too?
It's all going to depend on how they're scheduled. So I don't want to go into the time trial cooked from a couple other events. So I'll have to see, and they don't have it scheduled just yet.
But if they're after, will you do it?
I don't know why not, honestly.
Yeah.
Would you ride with GoPros?
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I think the
Race analysis.
the reason to do this for me is because I don't have any dreams of winning anything on any of these things,
Yeah.
but experience, and I think I'll make some cool videos.
Yeah.
And even if I get just dropped really fast, it's just a cool video to see how strong these athletes are
Yeah.
compared to
Yeah.
me.
I think it's also
Yeah.
there's something to be said for just lining up at a national championship event.
Yeah.
That takes courage for sure.
It's like when Cross Nationals came here. I didn't expect to do anything.
Yeah.
Except maybe survive. But it's in your backyard. You got to do it.
Yeah, and I think it takes some courage to line up for that, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it's cool to do.
Cool.
You're gonna need Swannies, I would say for sure, for the road race. You'll need
Oh.
somebody to be handing you bottles, something like that.
Yeah.
We could probably find somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also, well, should we say? Yeah, I mean we're already registered for it. Can we say
No.
no?
You're going to divulge
No.
secrets?
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. Well, we'll keep it quiet. The races that we're doing. Okay.
And then the road race is only 90K too. So it's not that long a race.
Yeah. I was just gonna ask for a Swanee for the unnamed
I
event.
know.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay, sounds good. All right.
Top
So
secret
if
stuff.
if you are doing Masters National Championships or interested in doing that, you should let us know. You can just go to forum.trainerroad.com, episode 241. Jump in there and let us know. It'd be interesting to see what other folks are doing it. We can come up with some strategy. If somebody's from Cedar City, Utah, or knows the courses, it could be really interesting to check those out. That would be awesome.
We can
The
ask for
inside track.
Swannies in the forum
Ooh.
because that has a lower circulation.
Got it. Okay, sounds good. For the unnamed event. Got it.
Another reason to go to the forum and find out what it is.
Yes, exactly. There we go. And let's just jump into some questions, then we'll
Yep.
jump into some other stuff. Let's get into Stefan's question. He says, hey there, recent Trainer Road subscriber, and I love it. Welcome, Stefan. Good to have you. So some background, I do something that I imagine many others do, and I wonder if it's counterproductive. For reference, I'm on the low volume plans, but I bolster the plan with a few strength workouts, a hard group ride on the weekend, about 200 TSS over 3 hours, and usually one aerobic ride or some cross-country skiing midweek. I usually complete about 500 TSS a week on average. My question, after I complete a rest week, I retest my FTP and feel stoked to enter into another training block. Due to my freshness, I feel pretty pumped during the first week. I usually find a way to do more than my plan calls for and often bury myself. Sometimes this is due to extending a workout or adding an extra workout, but most often it's due to going deep on a group ride to either make my pals hurt or more realistically, because the folks I ride with are faster than me, to hold on longer than I normally would before getting dropped. So after burying myself at the end of the first week, I find myself in a familiar state of fatigue entering into the second week of the training block. I then battle to maintain my TSS for the rest of the block. Generally, I can complete the prescribed low-volume workouts, but I usually have to scale back my efforts on the group ride, or I have to cut out an aerobic ride. Generally, my TSS drops by about 5 to 10% each week during a block, which is not ideal. In fact, if anything, it does the opposite, right?
You'd want it to, yeah.
Yeah. So he says, would I get more out of my training if I exercised more restraint in that first week of a training block and saved something so I could train more consistently from week to week? As a general rule, at what point would it be worthwhile to exercise more constraint? And he gives an example like, if you start to experience X percentage drop in TSS, at this point, it's a good time to do it. So lots of questions, but they all revolve around the point of basically kind of getting ahead of yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm a little perturbed by his use of the term Familiar. I find myself in a familiar state of fatigue entering into the second week of a training block.
Not this again.
Yeah. I mean, come on, Stefan. So, but this mistake and this logic applies to so many things that we do that are high volume and are a big bump in what we're used to, like training camps, stage races, and training blocks. So if you've heard the term January hero, summertime zero, I mean, then maybe they'll put a month on it. But the idea is that you're super fast now, but then you're not fast when it matters because, I mean, you rode that wave of fitness and you basically crashed into the shore. I mean, you took it too far, and it's an easy temptation. We've talked about it so many times because it happens really easily. It's so fun to be fast, and it's so easy to think if I'm this fast, I can get faster, and my goals are still months out. But if I'm this fast now, I can be so much faster than even my trajectory indicates.
Yeah.
So you just have to rein it in. I mean, we're looking for improvement that comes incrementally and consistently, right? We want little gains here and there. We're not looking for big gains all of a sudden and then plateaus or worse, declines.
Yes. There's definitely a lot of memes in this, right? Like, takes a test, gets a PR, suddenly like Strava KOMs are all mine, right? Like everyone, and you want to use your fitness because it's like fun. Like it's like a new toy. It's like I can do so much with this now. But there's something to be said, even psychologically, probably for holding yourself back like that.
Absolutely.
This is something that Brandon Need, our product manager, really fast racer, incredibly fast runner, triathlete, everything. And he always, if you look at his rides, he doesn't surge at the end. He doesn't do any of that stuff. He saves that for when it matters.
Yeah, he was the first one to demonstrate a really good example of that approach, the save your best performances for races. Because I always thought you can have your best performances in a workout or in a training race, and you know that you can do that, and then everything is going to scale accordingly. So if you know you can go that hard, then when it comes race day, you won't have to push yourself that hard. It's not the strongest logic, but it's the way most people approach it. And then Brandon took it from a different approach and makes it work really well. And it opened my eyes to a whole different way of going about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like the other side of it too is a lot of us, we kind of run into this mindset where we feel like, all right, now that I have fatigue, now, and we've talked about this before, like now that I have fatigue, now is like when, like, this is good. This is where I'm at. And fatigue is just good. And this means that I'm training and improving. But fatigue for fatigue's sake is not training, productive training.
No, and it's a fine line between what's productive and what isn't. I mean, because they're almost synonymous. The point at which you push a little past and you start to you start to suffer ill effects, and the point just prior to it are so close together.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's something that I feel like this is perpetuated a lot of the time too, because people are proud of the hard work they do, so then they share the fatigue and make sure they share that with others, right?
Yeah, the harder the better. It's like a badge of honor.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And it can be this like self-perpetuating cycle that just trends you downward, where you end up just running yourself down and down and down. And as you know, in this case, Stefan is saying, a familiar state of fatigue. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
So I think that like the whole thing though is you just have to have like goals, right? Like, and it depends on what your goal is here.
But I mean, goals are the end point, though. I mean, you have the process along the way too. And, and what I see far too often is someone vacillates between good workouts and bad workouts. They do this workout where they go a little extra and they bury themselves a little extra because they were feeling good. And to some extent, that's not a bad way to train. But if the next workout's always a bad workout after that, and it takes you too long to get back to have another good workout, that's an issue. I'd like it to be good workout, great workout, bad workout, good workout. I mean, it can't be so lopsided, right? Or it can't even be equal. If you're up and then you're down, you're up and then you're down, not getting it quite right. You should have more up days than down days. Yeah, like an ideal experience for me when moving through a training plan is when I feel like I can do all of my workouts like they're all manageable. Every once in a while, if you don't have a succession of workouts that all work, I mean, if you like a string of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, then again, you're probably not getting it quite right. Yeah. You shouldn't be completely crushed after every hard workout.
For sure. And this is like the big danger of incorporating group rides and everything else. And because it's interesting, like you pointed out, Stefan, that like you said that it may be too much TSS, but then you really get back and you say, but I also probably go a little too hard on the group ride, that sort of thing. And I can't help but think that like if you were more measured, perhaps even about how you went throughout the week with the other workouts and more disciplined with that, I bet you be able to actually maybe hold on a little bit longer with that group ride and not put yourself in a hole.
And also take a look at why you're doing those group rides on the weekend. I mean, is it just to, kind of flex your ego? Are you out there because you want to be exposed to other people's race tactics? Yeah. Do you want to have someone else dictate the pace and you have to hang on for dear life and figure out what that's like so that it benefits your racing expertise? Or are you just going out there because it's a fun thing to do, even though you recognize it's probably going to set your training back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, there's benefits to all of that, but it has to be on balance, right? Like I love incorporating group rides in my training because they are fun. So that kind of keeps the motivation level up. Riding with other people for me is really energizing. So again, that's keeping the motivation level up. And I do like it's a different cognitive load again. So you can work on process goals like positioning. But you also, I mean, it doesn't have to be about dropping people or hanging on longer. It can also be about you can focus on other process goals amazingly.
You can use the same group ride on a weekly basis to focus on different things.
Yes.
You don't always have to accept that you're going to go out there and completely bury myself on this particular ride and come back into next week flat because of it.
Right.
Go out knowing, I mean, how many times have you done this? I honestly don't know, but he's clearly repeated this issue, so he knows what's going to happen. So maybe occasionally skip one. Maybe know that I've got a big block coming up next week, and that block is more important than anything I'm going to get out of this one weekend ride. Yes. So I'm going to pass it up this week.
And if you really need that kind of shot in the arm of a social ride, but you know that you are tempted to go too deep, say on a certain climb, you can make the decision beforehand that you're only going to stay in the ride up to a certain point, and then you'll pull the plug, and then
just remove the temptation.
Exactly, but make the decision beforehand so you're not, wishy-washy in the middle of the ride or beating yourself up because you're quote unquote quitting. I mean, you just make the decision that's going to be best for your training.
And make it beforehand.
And I don't even think it sounds like making excuses if you tell your buddies that I'm going to bail out before that climb because I always go too hard and it affects my following week.
Yeah.
Anybody who appreciates improvement in performance and effective training will appreciate that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's never let one day throw off a whole week, because if a whole week gets thrown off, that throws off a whole training block. And then whole training block throws off everything else. And it's a shame to just let, one ride do that. But it's very much within our vein of we all do that, right?
It's completely understandable.
It's
I think it's so easy to
do.
talk on this because we've all done it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And we'll probably do it again.
So I was in the planning meeting. And I have a different approach to this.
Nice.
So, Stefan.
Nate's a maverick this episode. We have no clue. Loose
cannon. Amazing. Okay, so are you improving through each one of these blocks? Are you happy with that improvement?
Right.
If that's the case, and these group rides are things that help motivate you, this is one reason too I signed up for Dirty Kansas. Having a closer big goal than a year out. Sometimes having that lots of little goals makes the training easier in the week. And if you take that away, Brandon's the opposite. Brandon can he can do 1 or 2 A races the whole year, his only 2 races the entire year, and be totally happy with it.
Yeah, he might do 1 or 2 C races, right?
Yeah.
And that's
I can't do that.
No B, just straight to A.
So if you're improving and this increases motivation and consistency, and it sounds like you're still doing your other rides, you're still hitting them. Keep doing it. I wouldn't change it to be a perfect TSS build and then maybe lose some motivation. So just think about that. That's a good
point. We should have asked that question initially. Are you still on an upward trajectory? Are you happy with your progress? Is everything panning out the way you want it to? Then probably don't need to change anything. If, however, you think maybe you could get a little more out of your training if you just toned it down on these rides or skipped one here and there, it's worth consideration.
You just have to. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say. I mean, it wasn't just the group rides either. He was talking about going more and harder on some of his workouts. So I would say that's the first place to dial back, because I think the group rides provide a lot more benefit than just tacking on some extra TSS to a planned workout.
Yeah, that's right. We're pinning this all on the group rides, and it's not the group rides that are the only culprits, because he's also out there cross-country skiing. He's also out there doing easy rides, which may not actually be easy rides.
Right. That might be the lowest hanging fruit, right? Really identify how easy your easy rides are. I mean, they should be really easy. When I first moved to Connecticut, the terrain is really kind of a sawtooth profile, so it's really, there's nothing flat. You're either going uphill or downhill, which made my recovery rides really hard. And my coach gave me a heart rate ceiling. Couldn't let my heart rate go over 120. I had to go really slow up some of those climbs. Shockingly slow. To make sure that it was an actual recovery ride. So, dropping that floor of what constitutes easy might be some low hanging fruit. And then just do your workouts as planned. And then to Nate's point, if if the group rides are providing that extra motivation, that's probably not all a bad thing.
Right. Yeah. Especially if the goal for him is not necessarily to peak for some sort of A event or anything like that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
He's doing it right. If he has something that he's building toward, that's where you step back. So
my husband's a really smart guy, and I remember I got really sick and I was coming back from illness, and it's one of those things where you're sort of trying to like feel your way and figure out like, am I well enough? And I was feeling better, and I was really chomping at the bit to get back on the bike. And so I remember telling him, all right, today I feel a lot better. I think I'm gonna get back on the bike. And he's like, well, if you feel a lot better, maybe you shouldn't get back on the bike for another day or two. And I just looked at him like he was nuts. And he was like, well, it's not just about being healthy again. It's also having the hunger to be on the bike. Like if you hold off for 1 or 2 days, when you get back to the bike, that fire is going to be burning really hot, right? So that's another consideration as well. And that goes back to the consistency, like holding yourself back a little bit to hit the consistency is probably more important. And then also that mentality of, if you're just tacking on a little bit more, and it's tanking your motivation, and then you're needing to add in these group rides to bring your motivation back up. I mean, that sounds like a bit of a vicious cycle if that's what's happening.
Sure. Yeah. Carter's question says, first off, thank you for an excellent product that keeps getting better and for an excellent podcast. Also, thank you for newest addition to the TR suite of features, Plan Builder. Awesome. Yeah. Constant improvement. That's what we're all about. So it says, my question pertains to plan selection for the extremely time crunch cyclist. And he says extremely himself. He says, on most days, I can only get 45 minutes on the trainer. I would love to spend more time, but between a long commute, a young family, 2 parents working full-time at demanding jobs, and 2 dogs who need their morning run, 45 minutes is what I have to work with. As it is, and first of all, you should feel good on you for balancing all that and still managing, and for seeing 45 minutes that you can still do within all that, that's great. So don't beat yourself up over that, because I live in that world very similarly to that, and it's hard sometimes when you're like, oh, I can only do 30 minutes or 45 minutes today. And you start to compare to either past self or others. Exactly. It's not nothing. So good on you, Carter, for doing that. So says, as it is, I'm lucky to fit in 6 hours of sleep. So getting up even earlier to stretch that training time really isn't an option. Until we move closer to work, 45 minutes is what I have. I think Carter is just me, actually. So I think I wrote this in. It says, I'm familiar with the time crunch plans and have completed the time crunch 45 mid-volume plan a few times. Each time I have seen a bump in FTP, and the workouts have left me wondering how it's possible to get that tired in only 45 minutes. He says, long term, though, I'm wondering if this is the best approach for continued growth as a cyclist. Would I be better served sticking with repeating the time crunch plan or time crunch 45 plan over and over again? Or does it make more sense to do a base, build, and specialty progression as laid out by Plan Builder, but substitute the -4 versions of the workouts to keep the time on the bike at 45 minutes? So what he's referring to right there is the majority of the workouts within the catalog that you'll come across in your training plans, they'll have variants, like adjustments.
Yeah, where it's not always a consistent minus anything. Just minus versions are going to be tougher than the base version. Plus versions are going to, or the other way around, a little easier. Plus versions will be a little tougher.
Yep, exactly. So his question basically is, should I just keep repeating time crunch? I have seen improvement already. Or should I just do a Plan Builder plan and then find the short versions of those workouts?
Yeah, so when Jonathan and I were discussing this one, we decided it might be interesting to take a good, better, best approach.
Yeah.
And so I think the good in this case would be what he's doing right now, or not even what is this? Who are we talking to?
Carter. Yeah.
Carter. What Carter's doing right now would be. Actually, he's probably in the better realm. We'll get to that. Good would be just using the time crunch plan because you recognize you don't have much time to train. But with that said, I do want to make clear what those plans are aimed at. They're aimed at basically at busy people who are trying to, I call them patch plans. We're trying to fill in for something when you just don't have the time to do what you'd like to be doing. You don't have the time to dedicate to training. So these plans are just that. It's a patch, and you can use them for a long period of time too, but you have to recognize some of their limitations. One is they don't have a specific goal. This is really just an energy system touch-up. So every energy system in the spectrum gets hit on a weekly basis. So I just don't want anything to go away, regardless of what sort of athlete you are. You're going to touch each of these energy systems one time. So they're not targeted to anything specific. then this assumes you probably aren't working toward anything specific. If anything, you want general fitness, or you just want to maintain the fitness you've built. The outcomes are really different across riders too. Some people will come into this and either the lower mid volume will be a good holding pattern for them. It will be just enough stress to keep them where they are. No lost fitness, minimal time commitment. For some people, it will actually elevate fitness, and it sounds like this is where Carter falls, and that's a good thing. I mean, if it's above and beyond, excuse me, what you're used to doing, then there's a good chance you're going to see progress, assuming you're treating your recovery and your sleep and all the other stressors in life accordingly. And then for some, especially with I think the mid-volume plans, it can be overwhelming. Because these plans, all they are is intensity. So if you're trying to do 4 or 5 days, I think the mid-volume is 5 days. 5 days. And yeah, they are short workouts, but they're highly intense workouts. That's only going to work for so long. So even the fittest riders, you just can't heap that much intensity onto yourself on a week-to-week basis. Which brings me to the last point. There are no scheduled recovery weeks in this. That's on you. So again, they're patch plans. You choose a week here and there. You choose a series of weeks here and there, but you got to schedule in your own recovery. So there's a little bit of work with these. These don't slot nicely into the plan builder.
Right. Yep.
So there's the good approach, using them when you need them.
Can I cover just an example for that really quick? My brother was, going through college, also working full-time, wife full-time, really tough. And he came into those plans and used those plans, and it made a huge bump in his fitness.
Cool.
And the interesting thing about that too is that he did, just a lot of short mountain bike rides, but then also like some big long day ones, like the whole enchilada in southern Utah or something, where it's like all day on the bike. And that sort of fitness, because he had come from like not training, basically. I mean, active person that does, skiing, hiking, that sort of stuff too. But he wasn't where he wanted to be fitness wise, and it still ended up helping him. So when we say that these are like, these are patch plans, absolutely. That's what they're intended for. And that's what, my brother used them for. But that doesn't mean that you, and just to reiterate what Chad said, it doesn't mean that you won't see a benefit. You absolutely can see a benefit.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Well, like you said, you're stressing all those systems, and that means that you're going to be, cultivating adaptations in all of those systems.
And probably hitting something you don't typically address.
It's just not a long-term solution usually, right?
Yeah.
Probably not, just because there is so much intensity. And there are some moderate intensity days, the sweet spot and over-unders and stuff like that. But that's still, it'll still take a heavy toll. That's not riding pedal for 60 minutes when you need a break.
Ask me if that's high intensity when I'm in the middle of the over-unders.
Exactly.
It's high enough.
Okay, so the better approach would be basically what you're doing, Carter, and that's repeating the plan, the time crunch plans, all the things that I just said in mind, and if the gains are still occurring. Yeah. And according to you, they are. So it's really hard to try to fix something that ain't broke, right? So maybe you stay this course for a little while, but you do have to recognize the signs for burnout, stagnation. Maybe you're just getting bored with it and it's not motivating. It doesn't make you want to get on the bike because I can't do this plan another time through. But and then finally, what I said with the good approach is that you need breaks from intensity from time to time. You can only stack so many weeks of intensity end to end before wheels start to come off the wagon. And then, so what the best approach in our opinions, we share the same opinion on this, is to use a plan builder and just simply look for the shorter versions of the scheduled workouts, because then you are working toward a specific goal. You're getting variety that's applicable to the type of training adaptations you're seeking. Recovery is scheduled into the week and into the plans, and they're progressive in nature. With the time crunch plans, they're basically each week is really similar to the week before. So there's no real progression intended.
Yeah, this is a really good, I guess, pro tip for people when you do have a training plan that you've built with Plan Builder and gone through the whole thing. If you don't have enough time, there are the minus versions, and it's awesome to be able to keep things on track.
And that's the point that we both landed on, that it excites us both, is to recognize that you may have a 60-minute or a 75-minute workout scheduled, but if all you have is 45 minutes or even 30 minutes, you can still get so much of the necessary benefit. At least it'll top you off, and you won't, and you're very unlikely to lose fitness. And there's a chance that you're still riding some upswing, and this is just enough to further that upswing a little bit.
And it's like a lot of the time, because we have 45 minutes and we have a 60-minute workout scheduled, we just kind of throw everything out, and we're like, nope, can't do it.
It's so much better to do a 30 or a 45 than nothing
Money
at all.
in the bank.
That's like traveling. I thought 45 minutes of intensity. I think I got them from the time crunch plan. It's like that will hopefully. Actually, it was kind of like a taper week, because I was doing 2-hour workouts.
Oh no,
Yeah.
they're
come
very
back kinda
taper-like.
fresh.
Yeah. And it's a unique experience too. Like if you have been doing a bunch of 90 and 2-hour workouts,
45 goes so
it's
fast.
crazy, right?
It's
like
awesome. I'm like looking forward to
it's
it.
Ben's time and space. Like it's amazing. I'm
Yeah,
like,
look at
oh,
those
this is so quick.
the low volume plans because they're 3 workouts a week, day on, day off sort of format. I mean, that kind of is a taper in a lot of ways.
So if you find yourself in this situation, just try to do something. Even if like yesterday, I started Pettit, but I ran out of time, had to go pick up Simon. So as a result, I only did like 29 minutes of Pettit, something like that. Because there's a psychological value to that too. Physically, I'm getting a benefit, absolutely.
Yeah.
But even psychologically, I feel like I got on my bike.
You showed up.
And I showed up.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of value in that.
Huge.
I just fear that Strava
Yeah.
backlash for bailing out of a workout early.
Oh, yeah. Happens all the time. Happens all the time.
Do it to him, everyone.
Whatever. Yeah. So, but it's absolutely there's momentum to be had there, and so much with training when you're talking about stretching your limits, because in this case you totally are stretching your limits, Carter, not because you're training so much that you're running yourself completely down, but because life itself gives you enough to worry about, and then fitting in training is really hard.
You got to balance
All
it all.
stress.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you can get in something, it just like, man, let that build. Like let that momentum build up.
Give
Like,
yourself credit for it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like a days since injured thing at like a factory. Like, run that total up, man, and be proud of it. And if that sort of thing, I feel like motivation is never perhaps weighted enough in terms of training and its effect that it can have on
Huge.
training.
Yeah.
And if you are like really motivated and proud of the work that you've done, it just makes every workout so much easier moving forward. So
It really does.
So yeah, use Plan Builder for sure. For anybody listening to this, if you're in the middle of a plan, you should use Plan Builder too. You can backdate your plan. Basically, look at when you started your current training plan and say, I started at this date. That's when you hit the start plan date, and then it'll build it out. Everyone should be using it. It's awesome. Even if you don't have a goal race, you should be using it because it lays out just a perfect trajectory for you. So really cool.
Really fun and quick.
Yes. And in this case, you can always use the minus versions if you need to find shorter ones. Amber, interesting that you submitted a question. This one's from Amber. It says, hey guys, thanks for
Another
the podcast.
Amber, just to be clear.
Yes. Here's my obligatory 5 stars, love the podcast, et cetera, et cetera. Thanks, Amber. It seems like that wasn't very genuine with the et cetera, but we love you just the same. Yeah.
We'll take it.
It says, I've listened to over 50 podcasts now and have absolutely loved the content. I've heard lots about race tactics with the team, but was wondering what your recommendations are for road racing without a team and any tactics or strategies I can use. The teams around my area for the Cat 3 to 5 are one of 2 types. One, teams for the sake of getting a discounted kit, but nobody works for anyone and it's a free-for-all. That doesn't exist.
Classic.
We've all been on those
That's a
teams.
classic.
That's the majority of teams.
There's another type of team.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, for sure. Team number 2. Teams that are invite only that do work for a specific racer by applying team tactics. So this is like a good point. I don't think actually any other teams exist. Like it's very polarized in that regard. It's like kind of that or a serious team. Yeah, in my experience at least. Unfortunately, that is just how it seems to be. And with that being said, I'm looking to get back into racing after a few years off. I haven't been invited to any team, so I was wondering, what tactics can I use being an independent, she says in quotes, independent racer, apart from trying to bridge, form breakaways, etc.? Is there much else I can do as far as tactics go? Thanks again for everything, and you guys and Amber rock.
Thanks, fellow name person.
Name twin, right?
Name twins.
So I thought that this would be a good opportunity to. So I mean, all of us in here have raced solo and raced on a team, and you've raced on a team, right, Nate? I guess
Sorta.
kind of, not really, huh? Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been on the real team.
Yeah.
We've done races where it was me, you, and Pete working together.
Sure.
But Pete was pulling you back. Like he was like, there's something about, I wanted to keep him close to be better for the race. I'm like, no. Like,
Better the
why are you doing 350 watts chasing down Jonathan? So
Thanks, Pete. Love you
I think
too.
he wanted to keep it interesting for himself.
Hey, you know,
But you guys
interesting
didn't,
for him.
you
Interesting
guys
for
didn't
everyone.
attack me when I did an attack.
Yeah.
That's the closest I've been to a team.
Yeah, and I've raced
One attack.
locally. We have the Audi Reno Tahoe team, and I've raced with them, and had some times when we were team 2 and sometimes when we were team 1. Because that like in these examples,
yeah,
right?
even one team can kind of
Yes.
flip-flop between
In the same race.
scenarios.
Same race. Yeah, like man, there's so many. A whole comedy series could be written about amateur cycling teams and how they end up executing. It's pretty funny. So
Yeah, I think they end up in memes for the most part.
for sure, right? But I also thought, like, Amber, you having raced many times And also, even as a professional, I'm sure that your team went from team 2 to team 1 at times, or it just got to the point where you're totally isolated too. I'm sure that happened. And I guess we should go into that and the experience. Nate, you're gonna jump in with
I was saying it happens in the pro tour,
Totally.
right? When you get 2 leaders on the same team and you're like, what are you doing? They're not working together,
Right.
and they like sabotage each other.
It can happen. Well, the question is there much else you can do? And there's a lot you can do. In fact, in our document here, I think I have like almost a page and a half of stuff you can do.
She took her whole race diary.
They just like dumped it. So there is so much you can do. And the cool thing is if you do have those teams, those type 2 teams that are actually employing race tactics, you can use that to your advantage because you can if you know kind of how team tactics work, that can help you anticipate what are the things they're going to be doing. And when we do race analysis here, you'll see like I talk all the time about anticipating because those split-second decisions that you make, if you can anticipate, saves you tons of energy. It can be the difference between making the winning move or not. So just because you're racing solo doesn't mean that team tactics are irrelevant. So looking at other teams and just figuring out, are they working as a team? If so, what does that mean for what they're probably going to do? Can I predict and anticipate a little bit better? And I definitely have had a lot of experience racing by myself. So even though at the pro level, like racing on a team was all about teamwork. And yeah, sometimes you have clashes of egos, but at the end of the day, your director signing your paycheck, you do your job. You do your job. And that's very, very different from, Cat 3s, Cat 4s, Cat 5s, and even collegiate racing. So especially on the women's side of things, I think fields can be really small, especially in those lower categories. So this is a really normal thing, and it happens for a lot of people. So I think this will be a great thing to dive into.
Yeah.
But even, like I said, being on a professional team, there are plenty of times where, like, especially when I was living in Europe, so my team was based in Italy, come back home to Austria, I'd race the local regional races on my own, or I'd come back to the States and race local regional races here. Actually, a good one was I raced Tour de Nez solo and managed to win that one.
Here. Yeah.
That was fun. So I can bring up some of those stories in a little bit, but I want to just kind of walk through I want to start with like, what are the things that you can do? So no matter what the field size is or the composition, you can always race a tactically smart race. Like just because you don't have a team or there aren't other teams in your race doesn't mean that this isn't a possibility for you. And I think the biggest thing that you can do really is do your homework. So the first thing is know the course. And there's a lot you can do without ever having seen a course. Ride with GPS is a really great one that I like to use. You can use Google Street View too to take a look at what kind of terrain you're looking at. So do your homework. Even if you can preview the course, it's great. If you can drive it in a car, ride it on a bike. If you're at a crit, just walking around the course, while another category is racing, you can watch how people are taking the turns, look for any potential obstacles. But the way I like to look at a course is to identify possible selection points. So where are places in the course, based on the terrain, where attrition is going to be an issue so are there crosswinds, are there climbs, are there technical sections, where are good places to attack? So even if you're not looking for a breakaway, if there's a good place to attack, you can anticipate that somebody's probably going to go there. So that might be a good place to be on point. So you want to create a mental map before you want to be in position. So if there's a really big climb, chances are that's going to have an attrition effect. Chances are you want to start that climb near the front. So,
right.
Back that out. Okay, where do you need to start getting in position? And so when you look at these selection points, you want to just make a mental plan for being in the best position to make each of those selections. So you can think of every race as just a series of selections. So if somebody attacks and the break is successful, that's a selection. And everybody who missed that break missed that selection. If there's a huge climb and half the field gets dropped, that's a selection. So at each point of each of these points in the race, you can look at them as just like little selection points, and you just your goal as a solo rider to make as many selections as you can. And that kind of makes it really simple. It is simple. It's not complicated. That doesn't mean that it's easy.
Yeah, right. But that's a really cool way to look at it, because you have like the course is broken down now, and like you have all these avenues instead of just you're hoping that in the moment, like to your point of anticipation, you're hoping that in the moment you'll just kind of pick it up and You'll be able to make lightning strike with all the elements combining.
Right.
It's much better to look at it and basically like break it all down and have as many avenues as possible. It's really smart. Really smart way to go.
One of the key things that I like to do, which I think a lot of people don't do this, and it can help so much, is go preview the finish. And most of the races that we do, especially local ones, they're not going to be point to point. So usually the start and finish are at least near each other. So just go to the finish line and put your bike into the gear that you think that you're going to want to sprint in and pedal backwards for about 20 pedal strokes. So even if they don't have course markings up for 200 meters to go, that'll get you about where you might want to open up your sprint if it comes down to a sprint. But you kind of get some key landmarks in mind that you can remember that are going to be highly visible at the end of the race when you're really tired and your brain's not working very well. Take a look at what direction the wind is coming from. Is there one line that's better than another? What side of the road is protected? Are there any obstacles or hazards you need to keep in mind? And then you just kind of have that mental picture so that if you're coming in by yourself, if you're coming in a breakaway, or you're coming in with the field, you already have kind of a mental picture of what's happening. And then by that time, you'll have seen what's going on in the race, assess your competition. You'll have a better idea of how you want to play that finish out. But when you have a mental picture of it, it's a lot easier to do than coming into that blind.
Can I share myself as a bad example of that? You can go to our race analysis channel. Go to our race analysis YouTube channel. And if you look up Sea Otter, you'll be able to see a race that I did, a circuit race there, where you ride the Laguna Seca course. But I showed up the morning of, and the start had moved. I'd raced it many years, and the start had moved. And it just threw me off, and I was paralyzed. I was I don't know what to do anymore. Everything's broken. And I honestly didn't take this approach of just breaking it down, especially looking at the finish. The finish was less than 200 meters from a turn. Mm-hmm. So it was really quick after that. And I got a bad finish because of that.
Yeah.
And because I didn't stop and take this approach of just especially because sometimes things will be different than what you recon beforehand.
Yeah.
From the internet or from prior experience. And then you show up and it's changed. And that's why this sort of framework is so important, to break down those things and then especially focus on the finish. I could have also watched another finish of the race beforehand because they were just doing, run race, then the next race, then the next race. I should have done that for sure. And you'll get to see how it plays out. It ends up sucking.
Yeah, I sat there. I was timing from the last corner, how long it would take people from the last corner to get over them.
7 seconds or something?
It was something like that. It was close enough where you had to be first out. And I was watching, it was top 3 wheels out of the... were the only people, the top 3 wheels out of the last corner were top 3 in the podium. Everyone. No one was coming from 10th wheel.
No.
Right.
I think I was 5th or 6th wheel or something like that. And it was, fate sealed, right? Yeah. So this is a really good point. Mm-hmm. If anything, if you can't preview the whole course, definitely focus on the finish.
Just focus on the finish, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so when you're planning your race day, budget a little of extra time for that so you can kind of check it out in a calm state of mind. And then as far as your competition, if you know them, great. You kind of know how they race. If you don't, look them up. Check out what kind of races they've been doing, what kind of results they've been getting. You can do a little bit of research on that. If there is a team, again, understanding team tactics, you can anticipate what they're probably going to do. And if there is a team and they don't work well together, that can also help you anticipate what they're going to do.
Yeah.
They're probably going to chase their teammate in the break. Okay, maybe that means you don't need to be the one doing the chasing.
Hey.
The website to do that in the U.S. is Road Results. Mm-hmm. And I've done that totally. You see a team of 5 people, and there's one person that's first, third, fifth, second, first in the results, and there's other people that are 45th, 35th, and they all have those. I don't want to be in the break with the person who's the first, third, fifth, and when it's the 45th person or whatever in the break, really not worry about that person.
Right.
Yeah, just watch them go.
There's 2 things that I grabbed from that. If the team is evenly scattered throughout top 20 or something, top 10, top 15.
That's pretty scary.
I look at that and I think, they're either really fit or they are entirely just self-focused.
Yeah.
And they're really, you know what I mean?
Everyone's racing for themselves.
Yeah. And then I see the other side, like what you said. I either see, okay, this team just has one strong rider, or this team has a really good organization where they're riding for one person and then the rest understand that it's just all for that person.
Right.
So it's it could be both, but it's so helpful to do that, to look at that in the races.
So as you can probably tell, I'm not really giving prescriptions for if you're racing solo, go in the break, or if you're racing solo, attack or bridge. I mean, again, you really have to be present in the race and read and respond to what's happening. So there's no prescription to say always go in the break, but I think that a good way of thinking about it is, what are your best chances? So If it looks like there's a really strong team and they're interested in a breakaway, that's great. Because if you get yourself in the break, boom, your chances just went from like 1 in 20 to 1 in 4. And you've just neutralized all the power on that team if they're willing to let their teammate go up the road. Huge advantage for you. But if they're not willing to let a breakaway go, then it's not a good use of your energy to keep trying to force it if they're going to keep chasing you down. So just make those decisions on the fly and kind of just be smart about that. But again, reading the race, understanding what people are doing, and anticipating is good. Weather is a huge one. So be prepared. Be mentally prepared. Like if it's going to rain or it's going to be really windy, that mentality can be a huge advantage. Showing up with the right gear and tire pressure can be huge. Because if you're confident in the corners in the wet, like that's a huge advantage, and energy savings that you can use to your advantage. Wind can create selections on flat, non-technical parts of a course. So when you're doing that course recon, looking at a topo map can help, or even just looking at what's the prevailing wind pattern. So you kind of know, okay, there's a really long stretch here of 5K. We're going to be really exposed, and it looks like there's going to be wind coming from the right. That's where that's a potential selection point. So you're going to want to be in position there in case, so you don't get caught out of that and stuck in the wind.
I have an app for that, Windy. I think that's the name of it. And and so like when you go, you can look at the course, and that's actually what I did for St. George and everything else, or not St. George, Cedar City. Yeah. And just plots the wind and shows how the wind is moving through a region. And it's funny how like a lot of the time we just think wind is random, but like you said, it's a result of many times of the topography around us. So, and with urban crits too, like when you're looking at like buildings from above, it's super important to look at long avenues or long boulevards that are just going to channel wind, or breaks in the buildings, that sort of thing.
And if you've done your homework, let's say the wind's a little bit different on the day, and you know that you're doing a big, say 30-mile loop, and it's all left turns. Well, if on one stretch the wind's coming from the right, guess where it's going to be coming from when you make the next left turn? I mean, just thinking ahead on those things and putting yourself in position, again, anticipating. It's not rocket science, but you have to make that extra effort to think about it. Rain is awesome for breakaways. And the reason for this is everybody has that rooster tail spinning off their rear wheel. So it's harder to get right up on somebody's rear wheel and get that draft when it's pouring rain. People are a lot more reluctant to do that. So it's a lot harder to organize a chase. It's a lot harder to like get the draft advantage when you're in the field, and people are just really demoralized when it rains. So if you can be the person who's mentally prepared for that, and you just go out and attack like berserker, you would not believe. I mean, I don't know what the statistics are on this, but it's like a very high probability that a break will go, and people who are back in the field are just going to be like, ugh, I don't even want to be racing this anyway. Like, just let it go. Be that person who gets in the break.
Yeah. I think I remember Lance Armstrong saying something about that, how like the worse the weather, he was like, good. Like whenever like his teammates would be like, oh, no one wants to do this right now. Everyone's bummed. He'd be like, good. Like that.
No, it's great though. But think about it. Like if it's dumping rain on a race day, like how motivated would you have been to go out and do a training ride that day? Probably not very, but if you show up for a race, like you get a really solid day in your legs. And if you're going to be there anyway, you might as well race for the win. Why not? Just go for it. And then, looking at the terrain too, if you're on a crit or a circuit, just remember that if there's like a little hill, 30 laps in, it's not going to feel as little. So you might want to think about like, okay, especially on hills where you could kind of go either way between little and big ring, you might want to just say like, okay, I'm going to commit to little ring for the first 4 laps, to save my legs a little bit so that I can throw it in the big ring towards the end and really open up a gap if that's a good potential selection point. So don't underestimate attrition. You can use it to your advantage. But yeah, learn as you go, especially, road races are long, crits, you get a bunch of laps, circuit races, you get a bunch of laps. So try different things, identify key patterns. So I was talking about this with Pete actually on a race analysis video the other day. Patterns arise, especially in a crit, what lines people take, where the field bunches up, where it strings out again. If you know that it's going to string out on a particular straightaway, that moment it bunches up right before and put in like 3 or 4 hard pedal strokes, you can make up 10, 15 spots in position, and then suddenly you're sitting 3rd, 4th wheel when it gets strung out instead of at the end. So again, like looking for those patterns. And then as far as assessing the competition during the race, like try to get a feel for who wants what outcome, like who's going for a break, who really doesn't want a break to go. And the best thing you can do is identify people whose interests align with yours. So if you're racing by yourself, a breakaway is probably going to be beneficial for you because then you only have to worry about a handful of other people. Find the other people in the group that are interested in a breakaway. Be right next to that person when you click down a couple gears and pretty obviously start to make your attack and encourage them to come with you.
Yeah. Two points that came with me on the patterns thing. That's an interesting one because the field may create patterns. That doesn't mean that they're the way to go.
Right.
It may be a bad line. It's just what everybody sees. So that's what they're taking.
Right. And if everybody's taking a bad line and you see the good line, take the good line.
Yeah.
Make up a few positions every time through that corner.
Amber, you have some stories in here. I want to hear the story. Patterson Pass?
Yeah. So Patterson Pass, I raced. This is one of the classic NorCal courses. I just upgraded to a Cat 2. I was racing for Palo Alto Bicycles and went out and raced this course. And there's two like really big kind of selective climbs in this course. And I'd never raced the course before, but this was before. So obviously I was a Cat 2. I wasn't professional yet, but the WebCore professional women's team was out there and their whole squad was there. And after I made the first selection on the first climb and I ended up alone, I think, with 5 pros from WebCore in this break.
That was it?
That was
it. You against 5?
It was me against 5.
Welcome. Wow.
Welcome to the P12s.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yikes.
So that was really, I mean, it could have been really intimidating, but I just thought, again, like I think it's a Bruce Lee quote that just says like, keep your mind focused and present on what's happening in the fight in the moment. It's a really bad approximation of what he said. It was like much better than that. But the point is like, you just want to stay present and responding to what's going on. So instead of freaking out, it was just sort of like, okay, let's see what we can do. And I think on the next climb, I just thought, well, these are bad odds. These are really bad odds for me. So what do I have to lose? So I actually went on the attack on the next hill and managed to drop, I think, one or two. And then as we were cresting, one of them dropped a chain. And then it was down to like 2 in me. So then it was just 2 on 1. And then through a headwind section, I attacked again, dropped the other one. And then it was just 1 on 1. And I ended up second. So I didn't win the race. But given the initial odds, it was, I managed to pull out a pretty decent result.
I bet had you not attacked like that, when that chain was dropped, they probably would have slowed down, right? And they probably and then they probably, you wouldn't have spit them off. And it's just like that one choice to like actually race aggressively in that scenario.
Yeah, I had nothing to lose. Since you had
bad odds, nothing to lose. It probably changed. I mean, it changed a whole lot more than just that one attack, right?
Right. Yeah. And to be clear, I didn't attack when her chain dropped. I managed to attack to eliminate 3, and then one of them kind of took herself out of the race by dropping her chain. That was just lucky for me.
Yeah.
When it was 1-on-1, did they work with you? I think I would just sit on you if I had 4 teammates behind me. Like, why would you work? Did they work with you? Or?
By that time, I think that we were pretty close to the finish. And I mean, she was sitting on me, and I just had to measure my effort. I mean, that in that case, like
a tempo.
And I did try to attack to drop her, but it didn't quite work. And I mean, plenty of examples of this. I mean, just because the odds are stacked against you doesn't mean that's when you give up. Sometimes actually being aggressive is the best way to go. I was in a collegiate race really early on in my career, and one of the gals from WebCore was in that race, and we ended up in a 2-up break. She attacked on a hill and dropped me. I chased back, but I chased back in a way that, like, I was being kind of sneaky. Like, I don't think she knew I was coming, and I think she thought for sure she had dropped me. So I managed to, like, sneak up behind her, and I was so wrecked, you guys. I was so cooked. I had nothing. But I just thought, if I just roll up onto her wheel and sit on her, like, what's that going to do? So I just attacked like everything I had left. I attacked, and it actually was enough to like get her to mentally check out for a second, because she didn't expect me to come back. And then all of a sudden, not only was I there, but I had just opened up a gap on her. She kind of sat up for a little bit. She ended up catching me on the next climb. But I mean, you got to try. And a lot of this, like, honestly, it's less about how you feel and more about, tricking somebody into psychologically giving up or giving you the advantage. Actually, I won Tour de Nez here one year. I was racing on my own because I'd been over in Europe. I think it was my first race after the Giro, so I was pretty cooked. But again, I did all of these things. Like, I walked the course. I knew exactly where the headwind sections were. So there's a hill, there's a headwind section across the top of the hill, and then there's a chicane into the finish. Super fast, so it'd be really difficult to make up position there. So you want to be the first one into the chicane. A couple years before that, Katarina Nash actually took my idea, attacked into the chicane, and won the race ahead of me. I was super bummed, but I was like, this time I'm going to do it. I'm going to get it. But one of the things I realized was there were preems, and there were going to be preem sprints. So I realized that the preem sprints were also potential selection points. So I followed a preem sprint, countered it, got away solo, and then I knew where the hardest points on the course were. So those were the points where, like, through the climb and the headwind section, that's where I really put out the power, and then recovered through that fast section on the chicane and managed to stay away and win. So these are really basic tools, but they really work.
I got to ask, just back up to Patterson Pass Road race, 5-on-1 break. You got second place. You said the next year you came back and you won it riding for Webcore.
Yeah.
Is that what inspired them to pick you up?
Well, this was really
convincing reason.
Yeah. She was pretty good. She dismantled us. Let's get her on.
That was actually really fun. So there's a Cal Cup series in NorCal, and that year the whole Webcore team was out, and so it was like sort of me and my scrappy PAB team going up against Webcore. It was super fun. So like most of the races, I actually did have teammates that were working for me. And it was a lot of fun to like go up against Webcore and like really try to win. And we ended up winning the Cal Cup overall that year, which was really cool.
Like the Bad News Bears against like the it's cool.
Super fun. But yeah, at the end of that season, that's when Webcore did offer me a contract. So
sweet.
Yeah, it was really fun to come back and be like, no, I'm the one with the pro squad.
Can we talk about one thing about how to identify like the key rider or a key rider in a race to kind of go with? Like, what are the signs that you look for? And this is for all of us here, like things that you notice about a rider or tells that they give that they kind of like, I'm talking in the moment in the race.
You can't. I don't know anything in the, sometimes the most fit looking people or people that do stuff have no results. It's crazy.
Oh, I definitely have some. Chad, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, I used to know certain riders to look for, and, and even then, you don't know if they're on a good day or a bad day, so you have to kind of see how they race. But I mean, when you have very aggressive riders who manage to go and go and go, that's a pretty safe bet. Yeah. I mean, the fact is they've got enough energy to get away from the field, and they're willing to do it again and again. That's a horse-eyed back. And sometimes when I watch that same rider do it a third or a fourth time, I'll gamble, and it's paid off. And then anytime you're trading work in a small group, maybe a 4 or 5 rider pace line, I mean, it's really easy to start to ferret out who's taking strong pulls, short pulls, who's skipping turns all together, that sort of thing.
This is where developing a really good poker face comes in handy.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is something that's much easier to do in a small group like that, too, because when it's a big field, I mean, it's a much bigger guessing game. There are a lot of people who are completely off your radar. They're not doing anything. So how would you even know to watch them?
It's like what Amber said in this last video, what we did with Pete's Coffee. They sent a bunch of riders up who attacked over and over again. And later on, a rider that didn't attack once went.
Exactly.
And that's like, when it sticks.
Yeah, how did I know? I could have looked at race results before, and that would have helped.
But you also watch, like, when those early attacks were going, those guys were not driving the brake. And then there would be another guy that goes, that's not... They're
but
like
I don't know which one's
through.
the one, right?
At least you know. Like, at least you know that probably in the first half of the race, they're just trying to soften up the field. So you can be less, you can expend a lot less energy than not having to follow those ones down.
I think that, but then I watch all the NorCal racing videos and stuff, and so many times an early break stays away.
Sometimes it can't.
Yeah, it's just like
it's
hard.
Here's one thing. It's not many times like the rider that stands out to me isn't the rider necessarily that's attacking all the time, although I certainly recognize that. But it's how he shuts down or how he adjusts once he realizes the pack's adjustment to it. Like if a rider attacks is solo or with another group of riders, and then he sees that the pack is chasing him down, and when he shuts it off like very abruptly at the same moment that I would want to shut it down, I think, okay, this guy's actually trying to make something stick. He's not just a person that's just riding hard and attacking for attacking's sake. And then if I have a situation where there are team members that are attacking at the front, I'm not looking at them. I'm looking at who their team member is in the back of the pack. Right. Like that's because clearly they're trying to make a diversion and they're trying to drag people out for somebody else. Yeah. So as soon as I see that, I then look back. Okay, who are they working for? Another thing is there are talkative riders in groups. Sometimes they drive me nuts, right? But
always.
Always.
Always. There's never been a talkative one that didn't annoy me.
A talkative rider that is just talking for talking's sake, but then there's a talkative rider who is trying to motivate other people. And if you listen to their motivation, it's not really for that person. It's for somebody else, right? And that's like a dead giveaway. When people are vocal about that, it's amazing to me. But when they're vocal about that, that's clear.
Yeah.
That's definitely
That actually
something.
brings up a really good point. So if you're riding solo and you don't have teammates, let me just make this explicitly clear. You are never obligated to work ever.
Ever.
And there will be people, especially if you get in a break, Everyone's going to try to get you to work. If it's in your best interest, work. You know, and on if you get in a break with somebody who is who has a really powerful team behind them in the field, it's probably in your best interest to roll through at least. You don't necessarily have to work any harder than anybody else, but contributing a little bit just so that they don't like sick their team on chasing the breakdown. That's maybe in your best interest. But if it's not in your best interest to work, you are never obligated to work. And no matter how much people try to give you grief for that, just know that, you know, it's your race. Yeah, it's your race.
With that said, there is a longer game to observe or to keep in mind.
Yeah.
You can gain a reputation for someone who gets in a break and will do no work.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to at times recognize these are people I'm going to be racing with in the future. These are people who are going to sniff me out to be the sort of rider I am. They're going to look back. They're going to see me in the break. And they're either going to try to ditch me or they're going to shut down.
Right. You kind of like you have to be coy with that and strategic about it, right?
And
have it in your best interest.
As Amber said, you roll through. You don't have to work any harder than anybody else, but you have to show you're willing to do your part.
And if you are in a break and you do want to contest the finish, I think it's just good etiquette to at least roll through. And not necessarily, you know, like if you're really hurting and you're obviously the weakest person in the break, like you don't have to take a pull every single time, but you know, don't just sit on the whole time and expect to get a free ride to the finish. And then, I mean, technically you can do that, but like Chad said, like that's probably not gonna.
It's only gonna work for so long.
Yeah,
it's a situation too. I bet when it was 5v1 for WebCore, like they're probably fine with you sitting on. Like they would not expect you to pull through.
No,
right? Yeah,
like
5v1.
Right.
Like you could just sit on that.
They would have done that to a point. And then they would have started attacking me, and so it was way more in my interest to go on the offensive and then you know improve my odds. So then it was 1-on-1.
I have one other thing that I look for too is when I'm in a race and I don't make a move, or better said, when I see somebody make the move that I feel like I should have done, then I start to pay attention to that rider.
Person. Yeah.
Another way to say it too is like a rider that moves efficiently through the pack, like. Is even though you're in a bike race and you're trying to worry about wheels and elbows and handlebars and everything else and the course, I feel like if you're in a race and you're just constantly taking stock of everybody, when you get to that point where you're comfortable enough to do that, that really just puts you in an advantageous position because that's how you can pick up on those sort of riders. Like, oh man, they did the perfect move right there. That's what I should have done, or that's what I would have done if he didn't have a chance to go with that move.
Or the people who are covering attacks but not actually rolling through and working them.
Yes, yeah.
Those are people that like they don't want to get caught out, but at the same time, like they don't seem super motivated to get something to stick. So,
well,
also strong legs. Just joking. Don't let the strong legs.
Biggest legs possible.
Biggest legs.
Who has the biggest quads?
Yeah, shiniest legs. Yeah.
I've raced a lot by myself, and in the lower categories, and when there's not like the team working together, it really doesn't matter. Just do whatever you want because everyone's solo.
Even if they have a team jersey on.
Yeah, exactly. It's the number one type team. And the other one is we talked about it, but just be in the breakaway with the right selection, and try to stay on those people's wheels and cover. Don't bridge like I did in the last video that we had. But the other thing is, you see, if you're a sprinter. So many times you'd be like, Sagan doesn't have a team, but really, like, you can use the other teams to your advantage. You watch the videos where he'd win. There'd be a lead-out train, their sprinter, and Sagan on the wheel. And basically, he has a 300-meter lead-out person for himself, and he's using them as their team, like, quite effectively. So if you're a good sprinter, just be on that, like, lead-out train's wheel. And they didn't have anyone like gapping, and he would just beat them because he was a better sprinter.
He's very good at abandoning ship, so to speak, but jumping from ship to ship.
Yeah.
He's also got a lot of things to bank on that we don't have in the lower ranks. I mean, these teams are extremely well organized.
Yep.
He's a known rider, so people make room for him when he wants to come in. He's not fought in a similar way that a lesser known rider might be.
The opposite too, though. Everyone tries to grab his wheel.
That's true
and work
too.
against him
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and this is where investigating the finish can help. So you might not know anyone in the field, so you don't know who's a sprinter, you don't know. But people get excited at the finish. So no matter what, you can count on the fact that the speed's going to pick up toward the finish. So when you've recon the finish, you know where your landmark is, just surf wheels. Like know that, okay, I just need to be maybe, you know, with a K to go top 10 wheels with, you know, when I have my landmark in sight, I want to be top 4 or 5 wheels and I need to have an out. So that can help you. You don't even need to know what the wheels are. Just maintain your position and surf those wheels as the pace starts getting higher. And then you'll know when you want to make your move.
One super important point that you have on here, Amber, is like a mantra of win the race. And I feel like we've talked about that before, where it's if you're racing to win the race versus racing to place well, it's very different. Like you follow different moves, you make different moves.
You have to be a lot more patient sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then like if you're going into a race and you just want a training race and you want to just get a bunch of work in, that's a really different approach than racing to win. So again, like there's a lot of things you can do: attacking, bridging, covering, recovering in the draft. And if it doesn't look like there's a break going, there's a million things that you can do tactically. Just focus on a couple of key things. So again, like identify those key selection points, just have in your mind how you want to approach them, where you want to be in good position. Position is really the basis of everything. And then if you're coming into the race with process goals, keep it simple and focus on those. If you want to win the race, like you could just have a really simple mantra of win the bike race. Like this, a couple years ago, I raced Joe Martin stage race. We had like this whole series of stage races. It was like Gila, Joe Martin, and then there was this other one, Tri-Peaks Challenge that was out in Arkansas, a super climby race. And we had really done well on Gila and Joe Martin, and then we got to Tri-Peaks, and I was feeling really good. And I ended up in the break on the first day. It was a mountaintop finish, and I actually won. So suddenly, unexpectedly, the team was working for me. And then I kind of got in this panic, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And my director was great. I came in and was like, okay, well, if this happens on this climb, and then I do this, and I was like running out. I was trying to run out every possible scenario in my mind and what I should do. And he just shook his head at me, laughed, and just goes, just win the bike race. And I was so frustrated by that, because it was like, but I need a plan. And then we got in the race, and like at every moment where I was like, I don't know what to do, I would just think, just win the bike race. And it was so calming and so grounding, and it enabled me to kind of like get out of my head, calm down, and just start reading the race. Like, okay, this is a crazy hard climb right now. My teammate's driving the pace. Like, don't let your teammate drop you.
Yeah, it didn't stop.
Step one.
It didn't stop you from making decisions. It helped you make the right ones.
Exactly. It just, it helps you ignore the noise and focus on what really matters. So, and that might not be the mantra that you need on the day, but that can really help you to keep it simple and keep it focused. Pick one that has to do with your process goals, but have a just like an overall aim for what you want to get out of the race on the day, and go for that.
Cool. Anthony's question says, hey folks, been a fan of the podcast for a year now and pulled the trigger on a Trainer Road subscription at the end of December, and I'm very happy with the product. Good to hear, Anthony. Glad to have you on board. Says, oddly, when I read the copy at the bottom of my screen during the workouts, I hear Jonathan's voice in my head. You should hear Chad's, not mine. He says, my question, I've definitely been dehydrated. Oh, by the way, what we're talking about with that is when you do the workouts, you get workout text. Chad, we got another question this week, and somebody said, does Chad just like type that stuff in, like, just like sitting there? Because like, if so, that's super
He's typing
cold.
it live.
And I was like, no, like Chad takes notes when he trains, and he has a notebook. And in your previous house where you were at, you had rafters, and you had your little notebook sitting above you in the rafters, and you just grab it and be able to make notes.
It's a great time for inspiration. I mean, it's as close as I'm ever going to get to relating to the level of suffering these people are going through. Yeah. I mean, I'm experiencing it right then and there. So a lot of stuff comes to mind.
Yep. Yeah, it's not just cold suffering that he's, saying or anything like that. So my question, I've definitely been dehydrated and have cramped up on a ride, and it was the worst pain of my life. I'd like to prevent that in the future, and I'm wondering, do any of you monitor how much water you drink on a daily basis? Do you have a recommended amount? I know that I should drink water when I'm thirsty, and I do drink a decent amount, but I'm wondering what you all do. Thanks, and keep up the amazing work. First things first, we should probably address cramping, because we've addressed this many times.
Super succinctly, yeah.
Yep. And then we'll go more into the hydration side with this.
Cool.
I'm really excited about this. I used to think that cramps were a myth. Because for a really long time, for many years, I never cramped. I know, I know that now. And then the first time I cramped, I was like, "Wow, this is real, and it's really terrible." And then I was really struggling with this for a long time. So I can't wait to get into this.
Yeah, count yourself lucky. But you can postpone it that long.
Real.
It's ruled every race that I can in
really
recent memory.
That's great.
Okay, so just on the front of cramping, there's no definitive science. There's no research that's carried out to a point that can definitively say this is what causes cramping. The best we've got is a couple hypotheses, one of which is the dehydration electrolyte theory. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but that just ties to dehydration, making sure you have enough electrolytes on board to actually absorb fluid. And then the other is the neuromuscular theory, and that's just that this is where the TRP channels, the transient receptor potential channels, and all those things that the pickle juice and the mustard and all those things that hijack your brain for a minute and allow it to shut down those muscle signals. It's that idea.
That's the hot sauce too, right? The same.
Yeah, really anything of that nature.
Pro tip for that one: candied ginger.
Sure. Candied ginger.
Yeah, and because then you're not drinking hot sauce while you're riding a bicycle. Or pickle juice.
Yeah, no, but these things have worked, and they have worked like in an instant for people. They just don't work consistently, so they can't say, nope, this is absolutely what it is, and this is absolutely the solution. So it's looking like it's obviously multifactorial. There are a number of things that play into it, and both these things are definite hitters. So that they're part of it. So it is a safe assumption for us to say the hydration level in some way is tied to cramping. So let's just move forward with that assumption.
Sure. So yeah, I guess with that, let's talk about the hydration itself.
Yeah. So, and I have to eat some of my words here. First off, using the color of your hydration or the color of your urine as a method for telling you am I hydrated or not is problematic to say the least. These, if you've ever heard of Armstrong charts or maybe even seen them in a gym or a fitness facility, they'll show you, if your pee is this color, you're hydrated. This color, you're mildly dehydrated to extremely dehydrated. Armstrong charts. Those have been kind of shot down over probably not even recent years, probably a while ago. I think they came out, maybe about 20 years ago. I don't know how long they held traction, but they don't these days. The other thing, and so the reason you can't use the color of your urine is that some medications, some vitamins, drink a bunch of water in a narrow time frame, just plain water. Mildly diuretic drinks like coffee and tea, more diuretic drinks like alcohol, for instance. I mean, when's the last time, and I don't know that many of us do this anymore, but think back to your college days where you pounded 4 or 5 beers in a row. Okay, did a beer bong or
Christmas
something.
party.
Yeah, okay, there you go. You were probably peeing pretty clear by the end of that, right? Doesn't mean definitely does not mean you're hydrated. So that's problematic to say the least.
Right, and I think sometimes when people are like, "Oh, I've got to get really hydrated for this race," they just suddenly start drinking high volumes of water, and then they're like, "Oh, my pee's clear, I'm good."
That's the knee-jerk reaction, and that's what we think, right? So understand that our bodies protect against dehydration by retaining or losing water. Really good at regulating that. So often enough, dark urine can just mean that your body's retaining water. It's trying to keep you hydrated, not necessarily dehydrated. It can mean exactly the opposite of what you're thinking. And then again, that straw-colored urine does not necessarily mean you're hydrated. It just means a lot of water's coming out.
And sometimes, like if you go up to altitude, your body's trying to artificially reduce your blood plasma volume to artificially increase your hematocrit.
Correct.
And you just suddenly start having to urinate much more frequently, and it comes out really clear, and you think, "Oh, I'm really hydrated."
So hydrated.
Usually at altitude, that's probably not the case.
So there's in December of 2017, so right at the end of December, a paper in the British Medical Journal authored by Dr. Tamara Hugh Butler et al. And colleagues. This is a paper that was actually cited in an article Andy Blow wrote for Precision Hydration a year or two ago. And it's titled "Dehydration is How You Define It, Comparison of 318 Blood and Urine Athlete Spot Checks." And the gist of this paper, and it's I'm sure Tucker's going to link to that. It's absolutely worth a read. It's not a long read, and there's a lot of good information in it. But and I'll quote this: "Drinking to keep urine clear or maintain body weight may lead to overhydration." Just what we're talking about. I mean, if you weigh yourself prior to the bike workout, you weigh yourself after the bike workout, you think you're just going to pound a bunch of water and be back on track. Not so. This is how we dilute our blood sodium levels. So if you think of dehydration, clinically it's typically subdivided into intracellular and extracellular. And intracellular is in the cells, so within the muscle cells in this case. And then extracellular is the blood plasma. Okay, so when we see cell hydration, we'll get an increase in blood sodium because, we'll get an increase in blood sodium. When we see plasma dehydration, we'll get a decrease in blood sodium. And what this tells us is that water follows sodium. So this just imparts how very important it is that sodium is part of the mix. I mean, electrolytes in general, but sodium is the big boy on the block. And we've talked about this number of times. And when we're in balance between this intracellular and extracellular hydration, we have what's called normonatremia. Normonatremia. And that's 135 to 145 millimoles per liter of blood. And it's not important what that measurement is so much that that's a really narrow range. 135 to 145 doesn't leave a whole lot of wiggle room. So it says this is a very sensitive system, and it does its job quite well. But if we dilute it or overindulge our salt intake, we can push ourselves into that hyponatremic territory or the hypernatremic territory, both of which have their own own issues, and both of which have to be pushed quite a ways before they're actually threatening to our health. I mean, I know that you hear hyponatremia and you think coma and death. That's at the far extreme end of things.
Yeah.
So you can get a little bit hyponatremic and your performance can suffer because of it, but it's not in any way life-threatening at that point. So this paper gave me a couple takeaways. One is that urine concentration is not a reliable measure of hydration. And that's unfortunate because I used to recommend those pee sticks, and it turns out those pee sticks are probably no more effective at telling us that we're truly hydrated, at least according to this study, than looking at the color of our urine.
Oh, wow.
I know. That's unfortunate because I thought I had a real clear-cut way to say, yes, I am hydrated. And again, according to this paper, not so. And I'm going to defer to the experts here. So this leads us in our quest for clear urine to overdrinking. Overdrinking means more water in the system, means less sodium in the system, means dehydration. So you can actually, crazy as it might sound, dehydrate yourself by drinking too much water.
Yeah, it happens.
And then the second takeaway, excuse me, is that blood sodium concentration is key to monitoring hydration. So if you take nothing else from this paper, recognize the importance of sodium. Sodium has to be coupled with water in order for it to be absorbed. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you don't necessarily have to take salt tablets or have to take an energy fluid with sodium. There might be enough sodium in your system due to your diet that's already on board. So it's not just as simple as co-ingesting water with sodium all the time. But you do have to recognize that there is a very important electrolyte component to proper hydration.
Yeah.
Can't just drink water and accept that everything's going to take care of itself.
Yeah. If only. That would be great. Episode 221 is where we spoke with Andy Blow from Precision Hydration.
And it's looking like he's going to come back.
Hopefully. Yeah, it'd be great. He was a fantastic guest. And if you want more information on the hydration side of things, and we go into sweating quite a lot in that one. That's kind of the main focal point.
Good podcast.
Which obviously affects hydration. You can get more information from that one. So that's episode 221. How about some practical tips? I don't know, anything that any of us do to try to help stay hydrated?
So I have to say, I'm maybe not the cramp king, but I've had my fair share of cramps.
He's a cramp king.
Okay, I'll take it.
Yeah,
I will wear that crown because I earned it. And the one thing I did change, and really the only thing that was a consistent change, was increasing my sodium intake. Being very clear that most of the drinks I was taking maybe had 300, 400, 500 milligrams of sodium in them. It's pretty clear just from looking at my jersey and just from watching me. I sweat a lot and I hemorrhage salt. So obviously I'm a heavy sweater and I lose a lot of salt in the process.
Chad wasn't here when we did the salt test.
No, I missed that. I know. So I got to do it.
But not necessarily. Andy said looking at your jersey is not necessarily the best way.
I know, I recognize that too. But this is the one thing I've changed. I've gone from 500 milligram doses up to 1,000 and 1,500 milligram doses, and cramps are a thing of the past.
And you're using precision hydration stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Because I'm sure people ask, like, what are you doing
to
get that?
Yep. Cool. And I love it. It's subtle in taste, and they have packets. They have the tablets. I just like
tablets are easy. I know some people don't like the effervescent ones like that. Like they feel like it makes it bubbly, but y'all know that I like bubbles in my water. So, but they're so easy to carry. And then like you can just like, even when you're riding, like you could, if you needed to, and you just had a bottle of water given to you, you'd be able to pop it in. Whereas a packet might be a little tough.
Put in your mouth like Pop Rocks.
Probably good. I guess.
Just drink as
long
you
as
go.
you're getting enough water.
Yeah. Just cheek the thing and drink. Cool.
Okay, so in this case, my tips would be along these lines. On the dehydration side of it, get a sweat test, get a sodium test. They're simple. They're easy. You can even estimate it. But I think Precision Hydration will do it free for you pretty much anywhere they are, right?
Yeah, if you contact them, and then they basically have like different testing centers, I guess you could say. But they also are traveling around quite a lot, and sometimes they do testing. They basically say, hey, we're going to be in Denver this week, and we'll do some testing, whatever. So yeah, get in touch with them on their website, and they can do it that way.
Okay. And then co-ingestion, so taking in a little bit of glucose or sucrose along with your water facilitates, it works, plays nicely with sodium. So a little bit of sugar, and really if you're taking any sort of hydration fluid, it's going to have a little bit of sugar, it's going to have a fair amount of sodium, depending. Additionally, diligent note-taking, because there are so many variables. I mean, you can do a really hard race in the cold, a really hard race in high temperature, and very different impact in terms of sweat loss and electrolyte loss. So you have to keep track of this stuff if you want to figure this stuff out. And then, as I said earlier, don't rely on weight or urine color to determine your hydration levels because they're flimsy at best.
Well, I mean, just in terms of drinking, normally I always have a bottle within reach and I drink everything. Like when I get up in the morning, I drink a glass. That's like the first thing I do, sure. But like we discussed, that's not necessarily efficient hydration.
It's not even as important as you might think it is, too, because we have a number of circadian rhythms, right, that dictate certain things. And ADH or antidiuretic hormone, is it aldosterone or vasopressin? I can't remember what it is. But in any case, these are things that do ebb and flow. And as we go to bed at night, these are things that tone down such that water loss isn't as substantial as it is during the day.
Nice. And
that's interesting.
What I do before a race, though, almost every race now I've gotten into this habit, and I don't know, it could be really bad. Who knows? So N=1 here. But I take like a scratch packet the evening before, and they have like an everyday hydration one. So I have a bunch of those everyday hydration ones. It's not as like intense sugar and sodium levels. And I just drink that usually the night before, or if it's like a race in the afternoon, I'll drink it that morning or day, something like that.
Pre-hydration.
Yeah, and it's really just like trying to make sure that, because once again, I might just be drinking a lot of water and I'm not going about it in a measured way. But this is kind of just like an insurance plan to just make sure that at least I'm getting something beforehand.
Well, in favor of this actually being effective, I've used it for hangovers, and I don't have like hefty hangovers, but you know what hangover feels like, and hydration does seem to help it.
No.
Yeah.
I do.
It's not actually.
But if I couple it with a little bit, it's just like a packet of 500, which I think is really only 250 milligrams. So it's not much, but it's something. Instead of just pounding plain water, a little bit of sodium in the system, and I got to say, it does impact the severity and duration of my hangovers.
Scratch has, they call it rescue mix, not recovery mix. I think it's for that reason. So it's not just for post-ride recovery.
Yeah. And sometimes like when we would be racing in Europe and we'd have really long transfers between stages, especially during the summer when it's super hot. If we didn't have something with us and you're just going to be in the car for 3 hours, like honestly, like I would have just from a restaurant, like a few extra packets of table salt.
Sure.
And just take a little pinch of that, throw it in your bottle of water. I mean, a hefty pinch of salt into a full bottle of water, you don't actually really taste it.
Right.
And it's just a little extra sodium. So, I mean,
Yeah, we've talked about
every little bit helps.
Using sodium chloride before, and the pitfalls of it are that really sodium's only about a third of it, and then you get like twice as much chloride, and that chloride can lead to GI issues. Doesn't mean you can't use salt.
Right.
Just pay attention to the fact that I've used salt and now I'm getting diarrhea. Maybe it's not the best way for me to go.
Maybe it's a little bit much.
Let's get into the last question, and then we're going to go into just a few live questions. This one's from Violetta. She says, I recently started my trainer road plan, and I really enjoyed it. I did structured training before, so I was not completely new to training. But just a few days after signing up, she says in quotes, life happens, as you say, and I found out that I will be having a baby. Congratulations. It's exciting stuff. She says, I decided to do my homework and check to see if I should continue with my training, and got good news. After consulting with my doctor and other athletic mothers in our area, I'm planning on continuing my training with the condition that my heart rate doesn't go over about 80% of threshold. So here's my question. She says, how much of a training benefit is this still providing me? And is it only maintaining fitness, or am I still getting some adaptations? Love the podcast. Keep up the good work. So one quick thing I want to point out beforehand in terms of like the 80% of threshold thing, this is something that Violetta has arrived at after talking to her doctor. This isn't by any means us recommending what intensity you should ride at. And that's something that you should absolutely talk to your doctor about, because no two people are going to be the same in this regard.
Yeah,
so
all these situations are going to depend on physician advice.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of points here to add into this. I guess really let's get to the core of her question probably first.
Yeah, I was just going to point out some things that I plucked out of Stacey Sims' chapter on training through pregnancy.
Sure.
And not to rehash stuff that we've hit on before, so I'm going to try to limit it to new things. First off, it's pretty obvious that intensity is going to come down. The high intensity training probably isn't a part of your scenario anymore. Maybe in the first trimester, but probably not as you go along. And I'm not even sure it's okay in the first trimester. Again, this would be something to consult your physician about. And as you move through pregnancy into that second and third trimester, it's going to handle itself anyway. Last thing you're going to feel like, and I can only imagine, of course, but the last thing you're going to feel like, according to Stacey Sims and athletic mothers, is working that hard. But it's pretty much widely recommended that maintaining your training schedule is absolutely advisable and appropriate. Both the intensity and the durations are probably going to come down, but these are things that will probably handle themselves. And that suddenly denying your consistency, a body that's accustomed to exercise, a fit body it's gonna detrain. It's gonna increase your likelihood of weight gain, and there is a possibility of less than optimal fetal development. So there are impacts that it could have on the child. And Stacy Sims' recommendation, and I believe these jibe with the ACSM's recommendation, is 30 to 60 minutes of aerobic work most days of the week, and they pin that in the 70 to 85% of max heart rate. I don't really like basing things on max heart rate because most people arrive at that via calculation. So there are probably better ways to figure out what the intensity level is in terms of heart rate. And then resistance training twice weekly. And this, obviously, you're not going to be looking for any heavy PRs. This is going to be lower weight, higher rep sort of stuff. And then last couple things. Pay attention to how you feel as the pregnancy changes your body. Obviously, you're going to have to stay in tune with what you're feeling, and your workouts are going to change accordingly. And then, especially as you move through the trimesters, expect that your work, aka lung capacity, is going to diminish, and this is going to have a big limiting factor in terms of what you can and cannot do, regardless of how bad you want it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the core part of her question, in terms of like, is this helping me or is this not? It really probably depends on where you're coming into this.
Yeah, and right? I think it's worth noting that there's a lot of different reasons that you might have to set a ceiling on your intensity. So one of my teammates had that reparative surgery on her iliac artery. And so when she was coming back, she had heart rate ceiling. And then for a while, like a percentage of FTP ceiling as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons that you might have to have like a little governor on how intense you're going to be training.
Not just pregnancy.
Yeah, not just pregnancy. So I think like a really simplistic way of looking at this is like, where are you starting from? So if 80% of your FTP is still a lot more than what you were doing beforehand, like, or more that just simply more, then that might actually, lead to some gains. And if it's relatively similar, it's probably gonna be a maintenance phase. And if it's a lot less than you're used to doing, there might be some detraining that would kind of like ease into a maintenance phase. But yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways of looking at this. And there's some really amazing athletes out there who have gone through this. So Laura King is actually pregnant right now, and she wrote a really great article on theprokit.com. She does kind of a deep dive into all of this, and she's on social media as well. So she's a great person to follow. And Sonia Looney.
Yeah. Sonia's going through the same thing. She just entered her third trimester. Congratulations, Sonia.
Yeah.
And so, and she's been sharing all the things that she learns, which once again, these are all N=1 sort of situations, but, especially Chad, Nate, and I aren't going to get on here and tell you how to manage.
I've got tips.
But
I do.
The main thing, as far as getting to the core of your question, Violetta, it really does depend on what you were doing before. But that doesn't mean that if it's less than what you've been doing going into it, that it is not useful.
Beneficial.
It's absolutely beneficial and useful, at least from all indications that we got through going through our pregnancy and everything else. So
I've just got a positioning thing. So I saw Sonia did this on Instagram. She got a steer tube extender to get up higher because you can't bend over as much.
Yeah,
there comes a point
as you get larger. Yeah. With my wife, though, what we did, and this is nice to do on the trainer, turn the stem completely around, and then I angle the handlebars up. So instead of being in the drops, that was in the top, and you kind of can like just rest your hands on the top.
Oh, cool.
And that can make it so you can almost sit upright and pedal. Yeah. And then some women too, you have to know you're gonna like your knees come out as you're pedaling too.
Yeah.
But it's a nice low impact because running, you can still run or talk to your doctor. But my wife could still run for a very, very long time into her pregnancy. Yeah. Some people run all the way up until birth.
Yep. This is an expensive pro tip if you don't have it already, but that's like where like something like having something like the Tax bike or having something like a Watt bike or like the Wahoo bike, something like that could be helpful because you could make those quick changes really easily. And then your normal bike just remains your normal bike. Like it's not, you're not having to make any sort of change where you like buy something new or something
I think
like that.
Laura posted recently that she flipped her stem.
Yeah.
Got to that point.
Yeah, it's helpful for sure. Let's get into some live questions. So Caleb says, what's the best way to train for a sub 4-hour century? Would like to tackle one someday and don't know how to train. Any recommendation on fast centuries, road races in the Midwest near Missouri? I don't know of any courses in the Midwest that are particularly fast for that. But really, the same things that govern speed on any other ride. So having a good group that works together well is better than just having a really strong group. That'll over such a long ride that will play out for sure. And then also, avoiding wind, honestly, if possible, but that can be really tough. But in terms of how to train for it, I think so. Let's assume that you have a group. If you have a group, you can kind of get away with being like weaker than the rest of the group at certain times, but you can certainly help a lot by, I honestly think fueling is like one of the biggest things that people probably miss out on long rides. And if you can fuel that ride, you do so well. Like,
it's so hard though for 4 hours, like to get enough to carry it.
It is.
And to remember when you're getting really tired.
Yeah, if you're a bigger rider too, then you burn a whole lot more. Whereas if you're a smaller rider, you don't have to carry quite as much, so it's not quite as tough. But this is like one of my critiques of Keegan when he did that white rim attempt. He like hardly carried any nutrition. And I was like, just if you would have carried more, it would have been like so much faster because the last hour was like death. Like he was like hallucinating and seeing things and feeling terrible. And so I think that if you can carry, so like for me, if I'm doing 4 hours, that's quite a lot that I need to take in, but I'll do it through like dense gels that like the Marten gels, and then drinks. I'll always be sipping on something that actually is mixed to bring in. And then in terms of training, it's sustained power. It's an all-day effort.
Anything that emphasizes muscle endurance.
Yeah, we have. If you put that into Plan Builder, it'll lay out the exact plan that you need for something like that. Yep. But it's all about just sustained all-day power. So, okay, next one. For this one's from Charlie for you, Chad. It says, question for Coach Chad: when weight training, is it normal to gain weight after even a day?
Not likely. I mean, after a single day, I can't imagine what would, other than water weight. I mean, nothing changes that quickly outside of water. So more glycogen, maybe a little bit of edema due to muscle trauma. But
that's what I was going to say.
It's going to be water.
It's what too when you weigh yourself, because when I weight train too, my body holds on to a ton of water, and then like many hours later, then it all goes out. But I just drink so much water when I'm weight training, and I get my weight does go up a bunch, but after a couple of days, it should, and you haven't been training, it should level out.
Yeah, and
you're not gaining like a pound a day.
No, and it's not legit like muscle mass weight if that's
beginner
what you're asking.
Gains.
Yeah. No, they're beginner strength gains. Those are real, but they typically don't include bigger muscle fibers.
Big muscle mass adding in and changing that. Sadly,
I'm actually doing a long distance training camp next week. Janelle Holcomb runs a camp out of Borrego Springs. It's base training, so we're doing like 6-7 hour rides a day. And you kind of think like, oh, this will be great for burning a bunch of kJs and calories. But the interesting thing is, and my coach told me this several years ago when I started doing this camp, that at the end of that camp, your weight comes up a few pounds because, to your point, you are doing a lot of muscle damage, to not irreversible damage, but just enough to trigger some of the adaptations we're looking for. And so at the end of that week, whereas you might think that you would have lost weight because you were just burning through so many kJs, actually your weight tends to go up. But then if you give it like a week to 2 weeks, it flushes back out again, and it's mostly water weight. So it is interesting, and the water weight can make a really big difference.
Is that in a warm place?
Yeah.
Oh, I should go.
Borrego Springs.
Is it women only?
No, it's not.
I have the races next week, so I can't go, but that would be nice.
Yeah.
I should do some of those.
It's a lot of fun. We get to eat pie.
Pie?
Pie.
Yeah, we're in. Okay. John says, what workout bailout should be used first? But really what he's getting at, he says, has the team ever talked about which bailouts are least bad? Yes, many times. He talks about back pedals, decreasing the intensity, or cutting out an interval and just cutting the workout short. And really that's the order right there. Back pedal first.
Usually.
And then if it doesn't get better, then after the back pedal, you can decrease the intensity or skip an interval. Try that one too. And then if it's really just not working and it's a rough day, then you can call it and come back the next day a little stronger. But he asked an interesting question. He says, how can I tell if I'm backpedaling too much, or should I just drop the intensity factor? I don't think there's any hard and fast rule.
There's not. It'll change workout to workout.
Yeah.
But if you find yourself doing it a lot, just be honest with yourself. Today's not the day.
Yeah.
And if you find yourself, like in the case of something like microbursts, for instance, if you're skipping more than maybe 1 per set of 5 or 10, I mean, again, you just kind of got to say, this is just too hard today.
Yeah.
And dropping microbursts from 150 to 140%, that's not going to do anything. So there are cases where it's going to be very clear. I need to skip intervals. long intervals, long muscle endurance intervals, like long sweet spot stuff. You're in a 20-minute interval and you do a couple 30-second back pedals over the course of that. It's magical in terms of how much longer you can hang in there, what it does to rally your spirits when you take that 30-second break, the promise of it dangling out there, trying to postpone it as long as you can until you know you absolutely need it. Those are hugely effective bailouts. I hesitate to even call them bailouts. You're just being sensible.
Yeah, I feel like this is, once again, this is just what works for me. But if I have to backpedal in the middle of like an interval, like sweet spot, threshold, something like that, I don't know, whatever it is, like a steady interval, point being, if I have to backpedal twice in that thing, chances are I'm really going to look at that next one if I make it to the next one, and it's going to probably go down after that, and I may have to just cut it.
I still really like their application, though, because if you have, for instance, again, a 3x20 sweet spot workout, and you're 10 minutes into that first one thinking, oh, this is not my day, but you take a bailout, and then before you know it, you're on that second one, and maybe you promise yourself a bailout, maybe you use it, maybe you don't, but it's something like that. Is that carrot that gets you through the workout rather than as you say, I can't do 20 minutes once. I'm certainly not going to be able to do it 3 times.
Yeah.
But those little breaks that barely take anything away from the interval, if they take anything at all, it's arguable they're more productive than anything.
Yeah.
Are absolutely permissible and encouraged. And
then at the end of that, you end up with so much more total work time than you would have if you just
and probably still just as high quality as it would have been.
Money in the bank.
Oftentimes, my first interval is the hardest one of the day.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And the first couple minutes into
Yes.
a long interval after you've come off a recovery valley, those are discouraging moments. They're challenging.
And it gets better often. Like even in the past couple of weeks, I don't know why, but like my last interval has been the best one. So that's just
magic of the mind.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So definitely don't sell yourself short. But if you find yourself having to, backpedal to the point where you feel it's excessive, chances are it's probably excessive.
Just be honest with yourself. I mean, if you get through that workout because of those back pedals and you felt like maybe I took too many of them, but you still got through the workout, it's hard to count that as a miss.
Yeah.
And then next time, just try to do it less.
Like Amber said, more time at that goal intensity. That's
it's good. And if you don't, you don't. I mean, we all have bad days, and it's okay. And one bad day doesn't mean it's going to like knock all of your training out. It's so often that you have an off day. Who knows why? It almost doesn't even matter. Be honest with yourself. Today's not the day, but don't spend the whole next week, guilt-ridden or beating yourself up for being, this is part of sport. This is part of training, is learning to listen to your body and being honest with yourself. And if you need to take the day off, you need to take the day off. It doesn't mean that you're weak or you're not tough or you're a quitter. I mean, it really just means you're smart.
You might be better tomorrow.
And it might be the thing that actually keeps you from, starting to dig a hole of overreaching, overtraining. So it's a really learning to listen to your body and be honest with yourself is a good skill to hone.
Last couple of things. First of all, if you'd like to work with us here at Trainer Road, C# engineers and React Native engineers, we're looking for you. You can go to trainerroad.com/jobs. And then all of you listening to this, you should head over to our blog and our YouTube channel. This week we've published something about how Plan Builder works when you don't have enough time, and we kind of walk through different scenarios. A beginner's guide to indoor cycling, where we basically talk about all the tips from us that we kind of feel like would help somebody with that. So rather than it's like very basic things like that everybody would know, this is more like this is what has worked for us. So kind of personal tips, how to upgrade faster by picking the right races. Megan wrote that one, and it's awesome. So she basically talked about how to prioritize your races based on that being the goal, which is really good. And then we also did one with last week when we were discussing glute activation, a really muscle activation period.
Yeah.
And we have a post that Amber contributed to that Jesse wrote, and we have some images, a really funny, really weird looking image of me just laying face down on the ground. There's really no other way to show it, but it's pretty hilarious. So check that out. That's on the blog, so blog.trainerroad.com. And if you are on the YouTube channel, you can check out the pro tips to conserve energy and ride faster. We have that. So that's a race analysis video. We're going to have a lot of race analysis coming out. Tucker and I planned it out, and it is a packed calendar for the next 6 months. And we're going to have even more after that. So stay tuned for that. And you can always go to and submit your questions at trainerroad.com/podcast. We appreciate you doing that. Every week we get so many questions, and it's awesome. And please check out Trainer Road. We'll talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.